Yeah.
He is such a puke.
The house we took down.
Greg just came here. I don't know where he went, but
Craig Watkins.
I was just about to go like nuts on it.
me too. He tried to drag me into it. It's like, you know, oh, you did a fundraiser for this. He had a fundraiser for you. People.
So he said that to you?
He said it at the board meeting. And then he said I endorsed him. I never endorsed him. I'm going to, I never did. I haven't. I did for fundraisers 5 years ago, but
Can Amy hear us?
Cattle.
Sean, can she hear us?
Oh, dude, this is perfect. I'm off the screen.
Hey, I got major problems with this one.
You gonna call a couple things out,
Yep.
Greg? Yeah,
Back.
probably all the way. Right behind you. That's funny. Wow. Project. I'm not familiar with it, but
I missed it.
I don't know that it has to do with you and I. No. Hi, John.
Did you get it's to the
All right, I think you can go ahead and start.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's June 22nd. I'd like to call the regular meeting in the Shasta Regional Transportation Authority to order. And prior to doing anything else, we'll do a roll call, Amy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll start the roll call. Board Member Audette,
Here.
Board Member Cry,
Here.
Board Member Gallagher,
Here.
Board Member Jones,
Here.
Board Member Kellstrom,
Here.
Board Member Mazzano,
Here.
and Board Member Watkins.
Present.
Thank you very much.
For those of you, Board Member Audette is attending remotely on the phone. So, gentlemen, we will make sure that we announce our motions and our seconds loud enough for Amy to do a roll call vote on everything today. Please now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Cry, will you lead us, please?
You betcha. Salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, for you folks in the audience, we're going to go things it's a little different. I know you're all here from Cottonwood and you want to talk about the issue down there. So we're going to start with you. Okay? And you can stay for the rest of our meeting, but your topic is at the top of the list. I have 4 comment
Chair,
cards.
Can we do introductions first and then move to that, if you don't mind?
Well, has everybody filled out a card that wants to speak? Well, good. Okay, yes, we will do staff introductions now. Please go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, board members. Thank you for being here today. Sean Tejan, Executive Director here at SRTA. With us today, we have Amy Lindsay, our Administrative Assistant, assisting us with the meeting, as well as Associate Transportation Planner Michael Cooper, who's running everything behind the scenes here for us. Also with us today, we have Senior Planner Keith Williams, Senior Planner Jennifer Collum. We have Assistant Transportation Planner, a new planner here at the office, Laurent. I think he went back up there to help Amy. He comes to us from Ventura. He recently graduated from CSU Chico, so we're glad to have him on board here. And then our CFO, Jessica Carlson, will join us here shortly. One aspect about today's meeting is part of staff enrichment. One of the things we do is we send staff to participate in the CalCog's California Academy Regional Leaders Program, to which Jennifer was a part of and just recently graduated. In that role, she also, for a time, serves in a temporary educational position in which we have a manager role, which she does the type of management level type of activities associated with that. And one of those also is helping to run a meeting. So she's helped prepare, this meeting today. When she gets in from a personal appointment that she had, she'll be assisting and running the remainder of the meeting when she gets here. So with that, I'll hand it over to the chair.
Thank you. And because we have such a nice audience today, I'd like the board to introduce themselves, please. Your name and the city that you represent.
Yeah, Mike Gallagher, City of Anderson and Mayor this year. Glad you're all here.
I'm Greg Watkins, City of Shasta Lake, and I'm also the mayor this year. And I've been on this board for 12 years.
Patrick Jones, Chairman, Shasta County Board of Supervisors, been on this off and on for 8 or 9 years.
Mark Mazzano from the city of Reading, currently the vice mayor and chair of this board.
Chris Kallstrom, District 5 Supervisor, Shasta County.
Kevin Cry, Shasta County Supervisor, District 1.
And our council,
And Audette
John Kenny.
John Kenny.
and Tanessa. Don't forget Tanessa.
Tanessa Audette online. She is councilwoman from the city of Reading.
Thanks. Yes, that's me.
Okay, folks, as I said, we're going to move things just a little bit out of order. Item 6 is public comment. This is the time to set aside for the citizens to address the board on consent agenda items or matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the board. By law, the board cannot discuss or take action on matters not on the agenda, but may schedule an item for a future meeting. That being said, we give you 3 minutes. In the interest of time, we'll give you 3 minutes. And I think, Amy, you're set up for that? Is Amy set up
I
for
believe
time?
Michael Cooker will be set up for that.
Okay, Michael, keep us on track and let us know when we have 30 seconds left.
So I think they need to come up to that.
They do.
Yeah.
The first person is Cindy Ryan.
Actually, I think I will pass because I'm just learning about the motion. I have a letter to submit, but I have a home in Cottonwood on Second and Willow,
Okay.
across from the current charter school. And I have concerns about some of the ideas that are coming up with sidewalks, and it's already a concern that the gym has been built and taken all the outside basketball courts for my children.
Chair, can I interrupt, please? Ma'am, if you're gonna speak, we really do need you to get up there to the
Sorry.
microphone just because we're recording it. So
Okay.
posterity.
That's okay.
Sorry, didn't mean to be rude, bud.
No, you're okay. I'm Cindy Ryan, and I have a home. I've since 1991, but grew up in the Cottonwood area. And I have just concerns of things that I've been hearing about sidewalks around the elementary or charter school now. I have concerns with the gym that, there's things there that we took away from our neighborhood kids, that my children created basketball tournaments and to go on to play NCAA and different things. And then the historic part of the town, I think, is very valuable. And our roots of Cottonwood and who we are. And I'm just concerned about all the changes and stuff. So I'm here to learn more about that as a homeowner. And right across the street from where the proposed things are.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, boy. Nick Sidlowski? Sidlowski. Thank you, sir. If you please take a seat at the table.
Okay, I was hoping I would be last so I could hear what other people have. I wouldn't need to speak then, but I have been a resident of Cottonwood and a business owner although business, I've retired, for 60 years. And I missed the May 17th meeting. I wish I had, and I heard it was quite the ruckus. But apparently there was a lot of people, most people were in opposition to this project. I am too, as it stands. I don't know how this whole thing got started because I hadn't heard about it till now. Someone told me that postcards were sent out 3 or 4 years ago. I never got one. So I don't want to see Cottonwood changed. I don't want the historic area downtown changed at all, period. I was surprised when I saw this, and I know that 2 of the proponents for this are Sarah Fitch and Elizabeth Boyle, and their father wrote the paperwork for Ed Peterson, professor, to change that or make that into a historic district. I was really surprised when I found out they were part of this whole thing. Basically, that's all I have to say. I want to know, because I heard there's verbiage in the proposal, the grant writing, whatever, to do with low-income housing. And if this isn't a, as I call it, foot in the door, the camel's nose under the tent to lead to that, why was that even mentioned in there? Anybody can explain that?
As I said, we don't comment on,
Okay.
we're not allowed, by law, we're not allowed. to
Okay,
comment.
I understand. So, then you can't answer any of my questions then, can you?
Not in this form.
Okay, because I was told that the verbiage in this, it says,
Excuse me, that the Brown Act does not permit,
okay,
but you can contact the staff here anytime.
okay,
Not in this particular
Can
form.
I give him my card?
I understand the Brown, I know,
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I can contact our supervisor.
You have my number?
Yeah, I'll get that when I'm done here. So I understand that the verbiage in this, it says very low income housing, moderate income housing, and above moderate income housing. I have no idea what each of those are, and I would like somebody to explain that to me sometime. But again, if this isn't a forward onto this low-income housing project that's coming down the road. I mean, we shut this down in 2018. The whole town turned out. I remember I went to the supervisors meeting. I was so impressed because everything was so well organized by Cottonwood and Palisadro. But I was just there for the Cottonwood one. And if we have to do it again, we will, gentlemen. We don't want low-income housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Tina Kane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Let me start off by saying that I understand that this project is no longer in the process in SRTA. I understand that it's at the county level now. I did receive your email yesterday informing me of this. I'm here today to voice my disappointment in how this project was handled. This project should have never gotten to the county level, and an application for a grant should not have been submitted without involving our community. It is clear to me that your department notification to the residents in our town was inadequate. The first postcard that I received was when the county sent out postcards for the May 17th meeting this year. It's clear to me that only the people that were for the project were involved in the planning and notification. I originally heard from about the project when it was a lasso loop only because I was talking to a friend. Now, mind you, I was a board member for the Chamber of Commerce of Cottonwood at that time. I can tell you that 4 of the board members attending the meeting at the charter school and were opposed and verbally stated we were not for the project. It was not a unanimous vote on anything as stated in Keith Williams' notes. I can tell you that Dan Woolery submitted sheets of signatures of opposition to Dan Little and Keith Williams. Keith took a picture of everyone that attended the gallery meeting and the charter school meeting, proof that I was there. I did not pose for the charter school photo because I realized the purpose of his photos, frankly, was to say that we were all in favor. After the charter school meeting, I thought it was dead since I never heard another word about it until I got a postcard from the county. The charter school meeting, there were so many lies promised to get the Front Street businesses on board. They were told that they would get awnings in front of their businesses and a large sign that, like in Reno, that would say Cottonwood. I tried to explain to them this was never going to happen. They thought you were going to approve the fronts of their privately owned buildings. Common sense told me that wasn't going to happen. Mind you, Al Cathy was standing right beside Keith and said nothing. I asked for the list of people that originally signed in opposition that Dan Woolery submitted from SRTA and Keith Williams. I asked Keith for it on May 17th meeting, and he stated that he probably had it somewhere. I emailed Mr. Williams and copied Mr. Taggart advising, and he advised that his staff does not have a copy of it. Yet again, proof of opposition was hidden. It is obvious that little to no outreach was done during the application process. In fact, in the emails that were forwarded to me, it shows that Keith Williams left it up to a couple people to spread the word in some tweets. I would say that most of Cottonwood is not a tweeter.
Ask you to wrap it up.
Okay.
3 minutes.
I see in the paperwork that the project area property owners were notified via postcard. After speaking to people that live in these houses that claim they were not notified, it is clear that your notification process is inadequate. If it was actually completed, I am a homeowner in Cottonwood. I never received a postcard at any time to the county until the county sent them out. In fact, I do not know one person that states they received a postcard from SRTA. I also believe the emails between Elizabeth Boyle and Keith Williams clearly showed the collaboration between them to exclude anyone that opposed the project and stopped including anyone that opposed to anything. In the future, if you plan a project in the community, that you send notification to everyone in the 96022 zip code, not a mere 10%, and clearly handpicked 10%. I never saw the Facebook pages, or I definitely would have said something. I'm standing here today with 328 signatures, and letters in opposition thus far, collected in less than 2 weeks. A copy has been submitted to Al Cathy and Shane Winton at the county so that they don't get lost. If you'd like a copy, you may contact them. Unfortunately, the county has spent money and we have fought our hands and we have a fight on our hands and a county supervisor vote ahead of us. I realize that Dan Little is retired, but there should be an investigation done on your employees and specifically Keith Williams.
Thank you. Sarah Henry. Did I get that right?
You did.
Thank you.
Simple name, right? Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. I too understand that the cattle project has been passed to Shasta County for implementation. However, I come to voice my great concerns about how the SRTA staff conducted the community outreach for this project. I believe there to be large discrepancies in the statements of community outreach. It is stated multiple times in the grant that the community was greatly involved in the design portion of this project. Reviewing the supporting documentation and additional documents on public record would indicate the following as SRTA's efforts to inform the community of this project during the design process. A postcard distributed to 750 property owners / households, which represent only 33% of the 2,200 households in Cottonwood. A Facebook post to a private group that reached 18 people, or 0.003% of the population. A Facebook event that was boosted and reached 2,168 people with no notations of how many of those were actually Cottonwood residents. A survey sent to 66 people, or 0.001% of the population of Cottonwood, received responses from 33 people, representing 0.005% of the population of Cottonwood. The highest attending meeting held by SRTA was stated to have 35 to 40 participants, which represents 0.006% of the population of Cottonwood. I have reviewed the supporting documents provided with the grant application and noted there were no statements of opposition included in the final submittal, which is very concerning as I know there were multiple people who opposed this project from the beginning. We requested a copy of all documents that were indicated opposition from this project, from Shantigan, and we received multiple documents, none of which mentioned or addressed in the application. However, in these documents, there were emails to and from Keith Williams that indicate clear intent to suppress information about opposition. These documents also show that Mr. Williams actively attempted to prevent those opposed to the project from participating in future meetings. I would like to request that this board perform a complete investigation on how the community outreach of this and any other project was conducted that Mr. Keith Williams was involved in. There are several inaccurate statements made throughout the grant, including the statement that all 200 students of the Cottonwood Creek Charter School live along the paths area. This should also be investigated by the board. We have collected over 300 signatures to date of people in the Cottonwood community that are opposed to the cattle project, as well as multiple letters from local business owners and community boards, some of which were quoted as in support of this project throughout the grant process. We have submitted these documents to the Shasta County Department of Public Works, requesting that they reject the grant and select a no-build option.
Thank you. No other comment?
Bob, did you want to say anything? You came in late. You didn't fill out a speaker card.
Would like to, sir, we'd like you to come up here so we can record it. And your name is?
Robert McClure. Lived in Cottonwood for 66 years, never lived anyplace else. I don't want it to change.
How do you spell your last name, sir?
McClure.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
My biggest concern probably is the ultra low income housing, which is that for Shasta County residents or is that for anybody in the world to come into? I mean, is it going to be an open board for anyone in California? Because I don't want to have somebody say Cottonwood now has the projects, because those places do not get taken care of. Low income people do not take care of things that are given to them.
Sir, you came just a little bit late. Per the Brown Act, which we are controlled by, we're not allowed to comment or answer questions.
I understand.
You can, though, reach out to your supervisor.
I will.
Obviously, you know.
At coffee tomorrow if you want.
Yeah.
And get your questions answered. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. But I don't want them to change downtown Cottonwood because it's fine the way it is. I don't think we need handicap, corners everywhere, because how many wheelchairs do you see in Cottonwood? Why put something in there that is never going to get used? It'll only be a detriment to the way things are now. I live on First Street and no child rides a bicycle to school. No kid walks to school. They are all in cars. So if they do any kind of walking thing past West Cottonwood School to the west, it's going to be a waste of money because no one will use it except the tweakers out looking to steal stuff. That's who rides by on bicycles. They go by one way with empty backpacks. They go by the other way with full backpacks, and they're always looking for something to do. So I'm just worried about Cottonwood turning into the projects. Thank you.
Thank you. With no other comments, I will.
We need to double check that we don't have anyone online
Okay.
that is checked in, and then we did receive one comment by email that was requested to be read out loud to them.
Mr. King, would you read the email?
Sure. Let me do that first. We received an email from Mark Boyle. He said he is sorry he can't attend, but he had his own conflicting board meeting and could not be here, and asked for his email to be read to the record. So I will read his email. To the Shasta Regional Transportation Agency Board. My name is Mark Boyle, and I am Director and Principal of Cottonwood Creek Charter School, located on Brush Street in the heart of downtown Cottonwood. I would like to speak in support of the $14 million cattle network for the town of Cottonwood. 3 years ago, the SRTA did a comprehensive outreach campaign to Cottonwood residents in order to present the opportunity for Cottonwood to receive a multi-million-dollar walking and biking path project. A diverse committee that consisted of longtime Cottonwood residents, Front Street business owners, and school superintendents, including myself, met over the course of 2 years to review and provide input to the project. This committee worked with local residents and business owners on how this project could enhance Cottonwood, while at the same time maintaining the unique and historic aspects of our town. Throughout the planning period, it was made clear to the committee that this project was a standalone, grant-funded project that did not have ties nor correlation to any other county programs or agencies. Not at any time was there discussion that this project was tied to or correlated with bringing low-income housing to Cottonwood. Now, just as the county is ready to begin the project, there has been a groundswell of false information and social media posts informing Cottonwood residents that the cattle project is directly tied to bringing transitional and low-income housing to Cottonwood. I would like to share that if the original committee thought this was true, then not one person on that committee would have been in support of this project. Instead, every single person on the original committee saw this project as a unique opportunity to enhance our small town and provide safer walking routes to schools and bus stops for our children. I would like to share that as school administrator, I have written a number of grants that have sought funding from both federal and state agencies. It is very commonplace to include language that will make your application score the highest with hopes to be awarded. In these applications for funding, the applicant is smart to include language such as if awarded, the grant recipient may, or if awarded, the grant recipient could. This language assists in getting the loan, but it does not mandate or force the recipient to do what is stated as possibilities in the application. For example, both our school and the Cottonwood Fire Department received a federal grant loan from the USDA. Our agencies received this federal loan due to our location in a rural, low-income, and agricultural area. And I can share with you that there are no strings attached to these building projects. This is the same with the cattle project application. Even though there is language in the application that states, If the cattle project is implemented, it could support the opportunity for affordable housing. This in no way obligates or mandates the county to bring low-income housing to Cottonwood. As we all know from a couple of years ago, any proposed transitional or low-income housing must be approved from both the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. The Cottonwood Committee made its voice clear a few years ago, and the Board of Supervisors listened and rejected the project for Cottonwood. Now, we have the opportunity to bring a $14 million grant with no strings attached, a standalone project that is not tied to bringing in low-income housing. What a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our town. Going to work each day in Cottonwood, in downtown Cottonwood and on Brush Street, I see so many exciting opportunities and benefits to a downtown with the cattle project. First, walking and biking paths in downtown Cottonwood would jumpstart the needed revitalization of many of our downtown streets. For years, a segment of Brush Street has been a blight on our town with houses that should be condemned and that bring in crime and drugs. High-quality walking and biking paths that are well lit at night will not only bring more law-abiding citizens to downtown streets, make it harder for criminals to conduct their business, but they will also increase property values in all of downtown Cottonwood. According to the National Association of Realtors, walking paths, trails, and bikeways bring enormous benefits to communities. In addition to providing safe routes to school for children and safe recreational and exercise opportunities, trails, paths, and bikeways often turn old infrastructure into popular destinations. As a result, property values increase as a result of path and bikeway projects. Recent studies have confirmed that living near trails and pathways will raise your property value as an average of 3 to 5%, sometimes even as high as 50%. There's still more, but I feel like we're past the 3 minutes.
Yes.
Reading this. So can we enter in that the rest of it is for the record in terms of the email?
Yes, go ahead. We let them just, go ahead. Has to be brought into the record.
Is that a public record that we'll be able to see?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Amy, Michael, is there anyone online?
I don't have anyone.
There is no one that currently has their hand raised on Zoom either.
Okay.
So I would like to bring this back to the board in the future for a discussion item. I mean, can I make a motion now to do that? To agendize it in the future?
Board wants it as an agenda item.
Okay, so I make a motion to bring this back for a discussion item and bring back specifically the hiding of the opposition. I would like that to be part of the discussion.
I would second that, but I'd also think that we need to review how the application, when it was presented to this board, because it was presented, as I recall, strictly a bicycle, walking, and trails. I do not recall anything about low-income housing in that grant. I'm sure it must have been there, but I think that needs to come back so that we have a record of everything that was in the grant that this board approved, because it was probably in the fine print down there at the end.
Who has the,
Page 36.
who has the lead on this project?
So here, the status of the project is this at this point. Shasta County Department of Public Works is the lead agency on the project. They're responsible for the design, the environmental process, and the final construction of the project. SRTA's involvement at this point is that we do have a financial interest. When in the June 2020 board meeting, in which we reviewed as a board a variety of applications from different jurisdictions, including the city of Shasta Lake, Redding, and Shasta County for projects for consideration for the ATP cycle. The board had said if any of those projects were submitted and received their funds, we would provide a portion of the local match. In this case, there is a $1.6 million in regional funds tied to the Shasta County's cattle project as it was approved. That is in terms of the financial interest that the agency has there. In terms of the lead agency, that's correct. Shasta County DPW is lead. As part of the formal record for their process, everything should be submitted as well to them, because that way it can be all part of that formal process and they can record everything as part of that as they move forward with the project and or don't move forward with the project in the future.
Let me ask you this. Do we have any standing on the conditions associated with this project, i.e. housing, street lighting? Do we have any say in those matters?
Yeah, I mean.
We did, not at this point. That was part of the planning process.
So,
at
right.
this point, yeah.
So
The final design was part of a process that was, at the time, SRTA had a consultant that provided assistance, technical assistance. Shasta County Department of Public Works and sort of both were part of the process for a number of outreach opportunities, but the final design of what could be done had to be agreed upon by Public Works and that process and everything. So there's a number of different elements that were put into that application and project to make it competitive. There is references in the application related to housing because there is a question that asks all projects to say how could those projects potentially support housing or tie to housing as part of the process. It is recognized that while it does tie to that, but it does not be a project that funds housing. No housing funding is tied to this project. It is a separate standalone project for surface transportation project improvements only.
So my question, Mr. Kellstrom, is that if we bring it back to this board, I don't know that we can do anything about it. I think that has to be a decision made at the county level.
I think it'll actually be a moot point by the time we have another meeting, to be quite honest with you, but I would like to at least agendize it so that I would like to discuss how the opposition was hidden throughout this entire thing, how this board that approved it before my time had no idea there was opposition in Cottonwood. That's the part that I would like to agendize and get to the bottom of, because that I have a problem with.
Well, before my time, before his time, and before.
And I wasn't on the board.
I was on the board.
You were.
Yes.
So
I'm sure that if there was anything that said if we build trails, it will help low-income family in the future, it must have been down in the fine print and just as part of the grant, like you said, to make it more compatible.
Okay, so that's what we're gonna have to do then. We have a motion, we'll have to agendize this to have a discussion, okay?
Great.
So we have a motion. Amy, Mr. Kellstrom is making a motion to agendize this item for further discussion. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
And Mr. Watkins is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, the motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, we will agendize this for a future meeting.
You want your roll call vote?
Lozano, we need to go through a roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
Right.
so sorry. Yep.
Okay. We need a roll call vote. Go ahead, Amy.
Okay. Board
Amy,
member,
looks like board member Audette is having connectivity issues and she is not on the call at this moment.
okay.
Have a quorum without her.
Okay, so board member Cry,
Yes.
board member Gallagher,
Yes.
I've been yelling at kids all
member
day.
Jones,
Jones?
Yes.
board member Kellstrom,
Yes.
board member Mazzano,
Yes.
board member Watkins.
Yes.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Sure. Can I just make a point of order that
Yes.
Mr. Kellstrom did bring up, but our next meeting is October 26th. So we're a ways out, which I won't elaborate on, but that is the fact of the matter for this particular body. It's going to be a little while before we could even, unless we had a special meeting, which is an option.
If I can, I'll jump in there real quick.
Please do.
We do have in consent agenda, you saw as part of the schedule, we do have a special meeting tentatively scheduled for August 31st. So that could be possibly the next meeting. What I would ask the board to do is allow me some time to investigate and review the comments that were provided today. I've taken some notes to look into that, to look into the situation further, to figure out the process and whether that will be the August meeting, October. I will let you know, and we'll get back to you on that.
Awesome.
When exactly we will be able to get this as an item to bring before you, any facts that I do find out.
It'll probably be moot by then, but I appreciate
In
that.
terms of the lead with the project, yes, but there are some things that are brought up. I do take those concerns. I do understand those. And I just would ask the board to give me enough time with all the other responsibilities we have as well, look into it to find out and come back to you and give you the facts.
Perfect. Thank you, Sean.
And it sounds to me like, from what I'm seeing and hearing here, that y'all are pretty connected with this guy in Cottonwood. Is that a fair assessment? So you know how to get a hold of him. So I would suggest that you maintain that connection and he keeps you informed of the next meeting, and we'd certainly love to have you back.
Call Mark first. He'll screen my calls.
And we've got a couple of phone numbers here. I didn't get one from Sarah, but that's okay. We've got 3. We'll reach out to you. All right, I'm going to close the public comment unless there's anything else from the board. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay, but I can assure you the next stuff on the agenda is not that exciting.
Wait a minute, I think so.
Are you reviewing any grants? Because
quick funding workshop. If you want to see 1 or 2 minutes on how we get federal funding and where it comes from, feel free to stick around.
I think you've had enough.
Or you can watch it later. Really.
Good job for doing your
Thank you
civic
all for coming. I
duty.
appreciate it.
Appreciate that.
We do have an agenda item on going to all electric.
I got the news.
Oh, well, you guys can handle that one.
What?
So far.
So far.
Yeah.
I am hoping you don't hit that TV above your head. Now, y'all aren't here for the Cottonwood, you're here for our real official business. All right, let's move to item 4, Mr. Teagan. Our workshop.
Thanks for putting that forward too much. Appreciate that.
No sense in keeping them here
Absolutely.
all this way.
I tried to put the genie back in the bottle, but
That's okay.
Oh, thank God.
Hey, Sean, while you're doing that, can we get introductions from the staff here? Some people I don't know yet.
It's Mr. Binky.
That's county.
Sean Ankeny, Shasta County Public Works. Prepared to speak, but if needed, but we are taking comments from the public right now on this cattle project, collecting data to proceed forward. Whatever proceeding forward means.
Okay.
Drew Battles with Caltrans District 2 System Planning.
Kathy Gray, Caltrans District 2 Regional Planning.
Emma Ray from Caltrans District 2 Systems Planning.
Pam Morgan, City of Shasta Lake, alternate to Greg.
Steve Bay, City Ready. Chuck Ockenfield. Josh Anthony, City Ready. John Nando, RABA. And Kevin Wood, Energetics.
Thank you.
Jessica Carlson, Chief Fiscal Officer, CERTA.
You were busy. We got you now. Okay, Mr. Teagan, you're on.
All right. Thank you, Chair and Board. This will be a first of several. We've reorganized our agenda and our meeting a little bit differently. We're going to have essentially these mini workshops that we're going to hold beforehand. Today, we're going to talk about funding, federal funding specifically. I do have one bonus round to address Mike Gallagher's question a couple of board meetings ago related to high-speed rail. So we'll talk about it briefly because it is tied to it, but I don't think it'll be too interesting there. Today's meeting, we want to go over a couple of things. One, we want to talk about sources of federal transportation funds. Where do they come from? How are they allocated? What types of programs are there? Specifically, we've got formula and discretionary. Discretionary funds are also called competitive grant funds. We've seen over the years, especially at the federal level, a lot of programs gone away from more federal for formula and moved to more competitive. So that makes our work and all the local partners and our public works and planning offices a lot more busy trying to identify which programs to pick for the projects and they're at which ones are the best for those. And we'll have a summary of some of the programs. There are way more programs in the federal bill, infrastructure bill than I care to go over, and you probably care to sit through. So we'll have a summary and some great links that people can go through to be able to get that. And for your benefit, there's always a question of acronyms and terms, so I've got a whole list of them for you here as well. Two that I want to highlight just briefly, only because they're used interchangeably a lot, is IJA, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. IJA is related to the bills that passed through Congress when they passed the Infrastructure Act. And bipartisan infrastructure law is referencing when President Biden signed it. So two different names, they're referring to the same act that takes place. Where are we at on federal transportation funding? Well, there's three sources, two of them of which are our primary funding sources. One is the federal gas excise tax, which is 18.46 per gallon. And then there's the diesel excise tax, which is 24.46.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Every time I fill my tank, you're welcome.
Exactly. We appreciate that. The other taxes that they have, which were more recently last few years added, is some additional taxes on tires for heavy duty, medium, and heavy and medium duty vehicles, as well as truck and trailer sales of a small amount.
Sean, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. I don't want to, I'm struggling. Will you go back one slide for me? I'm remiss if I don't get my answer now. Did you say it right? bipartisan infrastructure law and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act are the same thing?
They're one and the same thing in reference.
Why do we have two acronyms for it?
Because that's.
'Cause government.
At the federal level.
I mean, it's confusing already, just for the record.
I'd say one is probably more of the naming that was done through Congress as part of putting it together, and one might be more political, if you could say, and it was used, but both of them are used in reference. Both of them are used in reference for all the programs. When we refer to them, they're done interchangeably.
Is it like carbon and carbon dioxide then?
Yeah.
Two different words for the same thing.
There's two different references, depending on how you want
Okay.
to say them. So that's how that goes. It is what it is. That's what we work with. So when you're reading materials or if it's online, either one of those references referring to the same bill that is federal funding from fiscal year 2022 to 2026.
Okay.
As mentioned here, excise taxes have not changed since 1993. What does that mean? And I want to mention that briefly because I know there's lots of discussions. I even think about it here. Talk with neighbors and friends and in family. It's like, what's with the money and, when the pumps go running up and down and what plays into it. Well, on the federal side of the excise tax, it's not changed in 30 years. So the federal excise tax is not having an impact on why the pump is going up and down in the prices when we pay our fuel. What does that mean though in terms of purchasing power? I think this is what we look at and we realize as local agencies and partners. Two different reports were done, one in 2018, another one in 2021, that essentially suggests that the purchasing power of the federal excise tax dollars that we receive today is anywhere from 50 to 2/3 less than what it was in 1993. From a application perspective, if I look at that, if I was to assume this here is one mile of roadway in 1993, if I use the low end, 50% of that road is now going to be built.
Hey, Sean, to interrupt there, the state though has $1 a gallon tax on diesel right now. So how does the state increasing it couple with the federal? Because the state has increased drastically.
Correct. So we'll have a future workshop talk about state funding specifically, but the federal excise taxes are not with inflation. They don't have any type of increases. They're a flat number.
But overall, I'm just asking, has the state increased it enough to cover it?
I think.
Have you driven on the roads lately?
No, but I've been to the gas pump.
I mean, for quite some time, the state taxes hadn't been, but we'll talk about the future workshorkshop, but collectively.
Well, we should have put it together right here.
If you wanted to sit here for an hour.
Cut something off the tail.
We'll work on that one. But just as a reference, if we had 1 mile roadway back in 1993, today we could only be able to fund 50% to 2/3 of that same roadway today. Now, this doesn't factor in the fact that we've seen reports through Caltrans, who keeps track of construction costs and what we've seen in the news, that over the last 3 years, construction costs, especially on road projects, have increased upwards of almost another 50%. So even what we're building today could be even less than what I'm illustrating here, as just an example of what is that at the federal level, at least. State, it's a whole different story. They've done a whole bunch of other different things and programs, which we'll go into in the future. So again, here's the different funding sources we have. It goes to the Highway Trust Fund. And that is just essentially the overseer fund for all of the funds that are available. Then every few years, we get an infrastructure bill. In this case, IJA, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, is the current bill. It is currently fiscally tied to the years 2022 to 2026. It dictates and directs how the various funds that we receive in revenue from the different excise taxes are utilized. I should also add that the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act is not just on transportation. They have things related to other types of infrastructure all included as part of it. We're only going to discuss the transportation side of things.
Can I ask you a question, Sean? Do you know, and it's okay, but I will ask. So 24 cents a gallon diesel I pay in California, that's a federal excise tax. So that goes to the feds. How do they disperse that back to California one for one, or is it spread across the beautiful plains of the great states of Kansas and every other state in the nation? And
it's going to vary depending on programs that they have available. There are different ones where they have minimum amounts that go across to everyone, and then the remaining amounts in funds are based upon population. So California has a much greater population, and it provides greater amounts. So every program is a little bit different. You're getting into nuances for all the different fund sources and how they do that. it's going to vary across the board. I'll talk about a little bit how they're dispersed and kind of what we estimate California does receive out of the funds. So with the Highway Trust Fund, it's authorized essentially $470 billion over 5 years. The Highway Trust Fund is then split between two other accounts. One is called the Highway Account. This account is where all of the funds go for streets and roads or bridges, a lot of the infrastructure, surface transportation projects, et cetera. Zero-Emission, bike ped, rail, ports, maritime, all those types of activities generally go here in the Highway Account.
Across the nation.
Across the nation, yep, correct. That's where the funds go and then get distributed to the different states and then locals. The other 15%, that's 85% roughly. The other 15% goes to the mass transit account to support public transportation projects and facilities. And then they're further dispersed again in between formula and discretionary. In terms of the different categories, here are the IJA categories. We have about 7 of them. We will only kind of focus most of our discussion on 4 of them. Roads and bridges and major projects, public transportation, safety, electric vehicles, buses, ferries. If you really want some good nighttime reading, you can read the IJA guidebook, pages 10 to 148, and they will tell you about every program in detail. If you really want to spend the time doing it, it's there for everyone's benefit. The one thing I was going to say, do we have, nope, in the roads, bridges, and major projects category, there are roughly at least 41 different grant programs that we're trying to track. I know that Caltrans has a spreadsheet to help track all the different programs for support letters, and they're at like 150 between state and federal programs. So there's a lot of programs out there that everything is split between, which makes it fun when trying to find funding. For California, these are some estimates from those different programs of what California anticipates to receive just in formula funding alone. So you look at about $28.2 billion for highways and bridges, $331 million for safety, $10.3 billion for public transit, $1.5 billion for airports, electric vehicles, $384. That's primarily focused at one program only. And then they have emission reduction resiliency projects related to weather events to help maintain culverts and bridges and roads and other stuff. The resource down here, Rebuilding California website is a great resource if you wanted some basic information on these programs and how California distributes all these funds. It's maintained by the California Transportation Commission and Caltrans. They do a good job of keeping it up to date on a regular basis. It's a good source of info if you're interested or for us, the planners and engineers. Just real quick from the California Legislative Analyst Office in their March 2023 report to the Senate Transportation Committee, they gave an update of what those fiscal year 2022 funds are. They were looking at about 5.4 billion with 3.2 to state level activities and needs, and then 2.1 roughly spread across the locals with a bunch of the different programs that we have. So this was kind of their report. That also is linked. It's about 4 pages long. It gives you how we're working today with the first year of IJA funds. We're able to put all that together.
Sean, can I make a suggestion for future? Because at my stage of the game, my eyesight's not really good. This handout's useless and it's very hard to read those graphs. So if you could help a brother out in the future, it'd be wonderful.
You say you want it a little bit bigger?
I can't see hardly at all. And I've got really expensive glasses on my head, so there's that.
If we can't see the chart, there's no way we can make all the comments. So comments out.
Gotcha.
And maybe it was strategy. Maybe it was a strategy.
There's some lessons learned that are coming out of this, working with y'all.
We're learning. Thanks.
That's how we do it at the city.
I can do that. We'll send you them afterwards.
Let's cut down another tree.
There we go. All right, so we're going to talk about transportation planning. One thing I think that got brought up briefly before is like, okay, we'll go for planning funds and how do they fund? Well, I want to give this perspective. When you look at the federal level and all the funding that's provided for transportation, 1% of that funding is going towards the planning side. That's all we use for our core activities. So across the nation, across the board, 99% of the money is going towards completing projects. 1% is for the planning activities that result in and to support the grant applications. And our core activities that we are required to carry out as the metropolitan planning organization for the region.
I'm sorry, Sean, I'm gonna make this comment or question, I'm gonna ask a question. So are you saying the 9.4 million that it costs to run SRTA is 1% of what we spend in all of Shasta County?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
That's not what you're saying? Okay.
What I'm just saying is that when you're asking about where's the money coming from and what we're going for planning funds, at the federal level, federal money across the country for planning activities is 1% of the total budget. 99% of it is going towards construction.
They only allocate 1% of all those funds.
And then all that 1% is spread out across all the different regional agencies and then also through other programs where they allow for planning activities.
Okay.
So
because you have state money as well in the 9.4.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. And other federal or state competitive grant programs that we might try to go for that they have.
To pay for planning.
Yes, so part of this is formula and part of it is competitive.
Okay.
Pay for competitive planning side. For us, that's two main sources. The, what we call our PL funds from the Federal Highway Administration, roughly about $750,000, $800,000 a year. And then FTA 5303 planning funds for transit planning. This is roughly about $95,000. That allows us to carry out our core planning activities and responsibilities as an organization. Information, administer meetings, and also to help us go for grants for other core studies and projects. This includes completing every 4 year regional transportation plan, which we're required to do. That is important for all of our local jurisdictions, because if you want to get federal funding, that project's got to be described in some form or fashion in the regional transportation plan when we go for construction funds. So that's one key thing that we do in working with the local agencies and our partners, make sure all the projects are included in there. We also have our annual overall work program that tells how we carry out our planning activities. We also have to then program those funds. So when those funds are awarded, whether competitively or if they're allocated by formula, we then have to work with the local agencies and say, where are we going to allocate those funds? And we have to let them know through this programming process and also then share that information with the California Transportation Commission, Caltrans, Federal Highway Administration, FTA for approval as part of that process. We also do performance measures, transit planning, freight planning. We have our travel model that we also need as a computer tool to help us do some forecasting in future transportation. And our public participation plan, which helps guide us in how we do our outreach. What do we do for different planning processes? What tools might we use? There's also a bunch of discretionary programs that are out there for planning funds that cover all different types. There are even some now under different offices that we haven't always been used to going for, at least on a discretionary perspective. If you're going for rail funds, you might go to Federal Rail Association. There are other competitive funds under federal highways. The one thing I'd say that we got that was very helpful, I think, for us is two tools that they provided that are linked on here. One is the USDOT discretionary grant dashboard, and it actually doesn't do just discretion grants, it actually does formula ones as well. You can essentially pick the federal agency that you're wanting to look for, the type of funding categories, so roads, bridges, transit, rail, and look for all the different programs that are available. And they also tell you who the responsible federal agency is, and then provide you links to where the information is. So that's a really great tool to be able to find out when you're trying to find grant opportunities and looking to tie projects with those. The other is the rural eligibility mapping tool. That is helpful for different programs. Different federal programs will identify if our area is rural or if it is urban, depending on definition. And so it varies, and this tool is helpful to help us know are we rural or we not. There's a number of programs where the entire county, including our 3 cities, are considered rural by definition, and then there's others where they're urban, defined as urban, with the census bureau's data. Collective region of a population of at least 50,000 and certain types of people per square mile that we have. So that's another tool that's been great to be able to quickly use. Now we'll move on to streets and roads. One of the programs we have at the federal level, again, this is fun. It's two different names referring to the same thing. Now I get into why. At the federal level, we get Surface Transportation Block Grant Program funds. These are formula funds that actually come to SRTA. And you see them typically when we talk about Regional Surface Transportation Program funds, or RSTP. On the consent agenda, we have an item about that. Those projects are made available for any number of projects, roadway maintenance, safety, intermodal facilities, you name it. There's a whole bunch of different programs that we use. Typically, we are using them for road maintenance and other construction activities. The reason for the naming change is very specific. The funds are normally done as the Surface Transportation Block Group funds. They're apportioned down to 55% available to regions. The other 45% is provided to states. And then in California, we have them broken down into different regions based upon the population. SRTA then has two options. We can either keep the funds as the federal Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, and we would have to do a call for project. And then our local agency partners and any eligible entities would have to submit applications, and this board would have to choose projects. That was less desirable generally in the region, and what we have as an option is be able to exchange those funds for state-only funds. That does a couple things. One, it allows us to have a less burdensome process for administering funds, so those funds can go a little bit further, and then you don't have to go through the federal environmental process, just the state process. Also, what we've chosen to do for a little over at least 2 decades or more is the agency is, okay, great. We then take that money and provide it to local jurisdictions by population. So every jurisdiction at least has some funds. Instead of doing a call for projects, where maybe one jurisdiction might get their funding that year. It provides at least some funds to augment the funds for the different jurisdictions. And roughly we have about 2.4 million a year right now is what we've been getting. There's a bunch of other different discretionary grant programs. I'm not going to go into detail, but there's at least 97 of them. They all provide different levels of planning or construction activities. And some of the different programs under IJA can be also found under 13 other federal agencies. So it's fun for us to keep track of all this. Or
inflation.
Tom, can you go back just for a second? Sorry. When you have total grant programs, you have only 9 less grants supporting planning versus supporting actual construction.
So I would say that don't consider those as cumulative between the different ones. Some grant programs are planning only. Some of them are construction only, and some provide a little bit of both and everything there. But yes, so more grant programs are meant for construction than for planning.
I mean, it's probably overstating the obvious, but when you have conservative people like me who go, less government would be better, I think you'd see a big shift in the construction amount versus the planning amount. I love everybody that works at SRTA, not trying, but there's a reality for some of us that go, my goodness, we're a little top heavy on the.
The one thing that you have to look at, and different programs define it differently. Sometimes when we also talk about planning funds, we're talking about pre-design stages. So this is pre-development, environmental, right-of-way, those stages. Sometimes those are classified as planning. So it's not like the planning work we do here, but it's key aspects that the public works departments will take to get the projects so they're ready to begin. So
I understand. I'm understanding more how the process works. I'm still not happy with it.
I can understand.
Know that.
I wish it was simpler too. It would make life a whole lot easier.
So do I.
One of the discretionary programs I want to mention is Safe Streets and Roads for All. This has been a successful program for us, at least in the first year in our region. This is focused specifically on safety. There are some requirements. A jurisdiction or region needs to have a comprehensive safety action plan. It has some required elements that's included, which are listed here. It's a very data-driven process that is done. Overall, there's about $5 billion or $1 billion a year available under that program as a competitive program. It's available to cities, counties, our federally recognized tribes, MPOs, and our special districts. City of Reading, if it was able to be successful in getting a $300,000 grant to be able to update one of their plans to have all of the elements required under this program, so then they can go for the construction funds. And so they're working through that process right now to be able to go through essentially the planning process to develop the plan, have all the needed elements, and then go for construction. Different projects. You might also remember the community project funding, which we've talked about before. This is essentially earmarks. It's made available for a variety of capital, economic development, and other programs. Typically, what we've seen so far, the maximum ask is 10 million. And you submit those requests when your House and Senate representatives in Congress let you know that they're opening the opportunity to submit project ideas. SRTA was successful in the past of submitting a request. We did request 10 million to go, of course, for the Fixed 5 Cascade Gateway project. We did at least secure 3 million. So they did go towards 3 million of that money did help go towards the construction of Fixed 5 Cascade Gateway project. There's also one called Reconnecting Communities pilot program that's available. It's meant to help deal with areas in which transportation facilities might create barriers for mobility or accessibility and development. There's different types of facilities. Railroads commonly are one that we think about that have split, communities in the past, and how could you, do some improvements, highways and other roads and facilities as well. Overall, over 5 years, they've got 1 billion that's available, and a variety of different types of projects that may or may not be of interest to local agencies. 3 more quick surface transportation programs that might be of interest to folks. One is the Rural Surface Transportation Grant Program, or RURAL program. This is for capital projects, highways, bridges, tunnels, roads, highway safety improvement projects. Local agencies can also go for transport demand management projects and others. But it's only got about 300 million annually, so nationally that's a bit more of a competitive program. But with the definitions provided, it does help rule out a lot of your big city areas. So you're competing against smaller areas. So that's at least nice in terms of that.
No, this is nationally though. This is federally. So nationally, every rural community is competing for 300 million.
Potentially, if they were submitting an application, yes.
So the geographical area of our rural versus our urban is what is,
so
in California, it's not even close.
Yeah, so one of these things with this program, this is where that rural eligibility tool is helpful, because actually all of our 3 cities, I believe, fit under the rural definition. And so could all apply in this case for this program. So that is one nice thing about that one. But yes, 300 million is not nearly as much as like $1 million a year to be able to compete for. RAISE is a grant we have actually worked with Caltrans to apply for in the past for Fixed 5 Cascade Gateway. There's $1.5 billion available annually. There are minimums and maximums to that, and we had worked with Caltrans in the past to try to get some funds for highway and projects that they have. Again, a bunch of different local eligible applicants, tribal governments, local, states, port authorities, transit agencies, and a combination thereof. And they also have what's called the MEGA program. This is really, from my view, this is a program I am interested to work with some original partners when we're thinking about like the Pitt River Bridge and everything else, because this program actually has a minimum threshold typically of $100 million for an ask related to projects. It's a national infrastructure project assistance. It's to help with all phases of a project. There are some different processes you have to go through on there to decide if that's what you want to do with a benefit cost analysis. But it could be something that we look at when we're trying to get federal funding to move, things like the Pitt River Bridge, other highway projects or key ones forward, because of the minimum amount is so large. So from regional perspective, this is possibly one of those regional funds we might look at too in the future. So we'll talk about public transit briefly here. Some of these funds, you guys are going to be pretty familiar with these because we talk about them every year, and we've talked about them as part of the TDA, the Transportation Development Act process and allocations. But we have our FTA 5307 funds, which are urbanized area formula grants. They fund capital and operations, especially in areas that are less than 200,000. We have the flexibility to be able to use those funds, or RABA does, towards transit operations. They did have a new requirement that a percentage of the funds are used towards safety. We do average roughly $1.5 million a year through this program to help support transit operations in the region. There's also the 5311 program for rural area grants. Shasta County typically is the receiver of these funds. On average, we've averaged about 400 to 500,000 to support the Burn Express service and other rural services as well, because portions of the RABA service area are in rural areas, so a portion of those funds can be funded with rural funds as well. We have 5339, which is another category of funds for bus and bus facilities. Typically, RABA is the recipient of these. Average is 180 to 200,000. And this can be used for bus related facilities and also to rehabilitate or replace or purchase buses. And this is the average of around 200,000 on the formula side. There's a completely separate competitive program for lot more funds that we have to submit applications for larger projects if we wanted. The 5311F, which the county also goes for every year, and that sort of typically writes a support letter for, is for rural transit intercity bus. More recently, the county has been able to average getting that program at about 280,000, so that's helping offset the transit operation costs of Burning Express and help fund that. And of course, that program is focused on connecting people in rural areas to urbanized areas. And so that program, especially Burning Express itself, is eligible, so we're always trying to maximize the funds we have available. We also receive at times, primarily as a competitive program, 5310, which this is a program that is specifically focused on people that are seniors and individuals with disabilities, especially in rural areas. DHCL typically, Community Health Connected Living, who operates our ShastaConnect services, typically has gone for these funds, both for vehicles and also on the other side of their house for volunteer driver programs to help with their adult day healthcare services. Some other folks in the region, also nonprofits, have also gone for funds in the past. On average, we've been able to secure 200,000 a year roughly when we apply for those funds. There's a number of other programs. The only two that I highlight at the top, FTA low, no, or no emission bus grants and bus facilities, are probably two that are going to appeal to us and RABA as we look ahead to deal with requirements to move to a zero emission transit operation fleet, as those programs can provide a significant amount of funds to offset any local investment and or leverage the small amount of formula funds we have and try to get the competitive funds and not impact other state funds that we want to use locally. We'll go over zero emission active transportation here briefly. A new program we have, I'm going to try to not take Maddie's thunder too much since he does have an item on this and we know item 15. There's a new formula program that sort of is required to oversee. It is focused on reducing carbon dioxide emissions on on-road highway sources. There are a number of different types of projects that are eligible. FHWA created a whole list of what they call tier 1 and tier 2 priorities. This includes sustainable payments, zero emission vehicles, energy efficient street lighting, and many more on there. In terms of the funding, we have a little over 650,000 available for the first 2 years. We'll be adopting a policy to be able to then do a call for projects. I'm going to do the rest from Medi on that one a little bit later. On the electric vehicle infrastructure side, there's the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI. It's a discretionary program that is available, but California is receiving roughly 385 million over 5 years.
Wow. Ask and you shall receive. Sorry, Sean.
I think
we got to get to the right page.
Literally hot off the presses.
What page are you on?
You're on slide 43.
Slide 43.
Happy now, Mike.
Take home.
They actually love me.
Read it over and over and over again.
That'd be fun.
Jessica, was there a little sarcasm in that? Not you?
If you don't know me by
That was funny though.
We have big pictures now.
Yes.
Yes, I can read the words. That's good
The
news.
interesting thing about the NEVI program is this is probably a program that
got 2 pages left.
industry is going to be more interested in, say, on the public agency side, but public agencies could if they really wanted to then own and operate these public available stations for a long time. This program is focused specifically on the DC fast charging, so the faster charging stations. They have some specific requirements. One is that the stations need to be within 1 mile of a nationally designated alternate fuel corridor. You'll hear about that a little bit after this presentation from Caltrans about that. And these stations need to be no more than 50 miles apart. The graphic that you do see there There's different colored corridors. Essentially, Caltrans has identified a bunch of different corridors, Caltrans being Caltrans headquarters. And over the next 5 years, different corridors will be eligible to then have funding set aside for those. So they've already essentially set up a certain amount of funds available for each corridor that will then become available during a certain year. And then people can compete for funds to provide stations on those corridors. Not every corridor will be included. So every corridor will get one opportunity or 1 year in which funds will be made available for that corridor.
And that's just for electric, it doesn't include carbon or hydrogen also, or no?
No, this one is
Strictly
specifically
electric.
focused electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Other programs have been focused on hydrogen.
Sean, I don't want to, thank you for the bonus round. I don't want to hijack this particular topic, but I've seen no less than 4 full-size electric buses charging at the Safeway charging station. I don't know where they're from or where they're going, but they're stopped in Anderson to charge their bus. And I'm just concerned that we're going to do a whole lot of planning and spend an awful lot of taxpayer dollars trying to figure out something that's already happening in the private sector. I'm assuming that's private. Somebody's making money off of those chargers in Safeway. It's not Mike Gallagher, but somebody is, right? I mean, they're paying PG&E for power and they're charging, you got to swipe a card to get the thing to work. So are we really going to do something that probably the private sector is already doing well in advance? I mean, is this, we're talking about funds. Those are taxpayer dollars. So if I've learned anything, I've learned that. So there's, how much are we, is that 385?
Sorry, $3.5 million over 5 years. I forgot the big on there. These are federal funds being provided to states. The states have to then come up with a levy plan of how they're going to utilize those funds. Caltrans headquarters is simply established. They're going to create a competitive program for these different corridors and then provide a certain amount of funds available for each one of those corridors based upon where they identify gaps for every 50 miles type of a thing.
So we'll subsidize a private industry to get a charging station somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah, that's probably what you're looking at from federal funds.
That makes me, I'm thrilled by that, by the way, just absolutely love it. I think we should do more of that.
We're not going to be doing anything. This is where this is mostly probably going to be a private sector side, where private sector or other businesses or others that are interested and want to provide those stations do so.
All right, well, make me really happy about the High-Speed Rail Authority.
Oh, I'm sure you're going to have fun with that one. Normally, I would have left this for state funding, but it does tie to federal funding in one way, and I think this might have been part of the question that Mr. Gallagher had at a prior meeting. One of the things that I have from the link, a lot of this information comes from the most recent fact sheet on the California High-Speed Rail related to the funds. Overall, the high-speed rail is funded with bond funds, Prop 1A funds, cap and trade program funds, in which there's a one-time allocation provided, and then 25% of proceeds since 2014 of quarterly auction cap and trade credits have been provided to help fund portions of the high-speed rail. And then the High-Speed Rail Authority essentially has been on it and competed for other funds over the last almost decade and a half. That's included our ARA funds that they've applied for in the past, a set of what they call Consolidated Appropriations Act funds, and then more recently, RAISE grants. RAISE grants is one of those competitive programs that we have worked with Caltrans District 2 to compete for. So on the federal side, that we may be competing against high-speed rail in the future for RAISE funds for regional project. That's where that may come in terms of where the high-speed rail may impact us, that we may be competing against them for a project that we think is important. They've had 2 successes in receiving RAISE funds, according to their report. In terms of the state side, there are no state gas tax or general fund funds. Only for high-speed rail. So that's according to their website and the fact sheet. So that was just the main reference I wanted to have in terms of what does it do in impacting us. It's not impacting our state gas tax that we're receiving, but we could be competing against them for federal competitive construction funds.
Yeah, because the 10, was it 10.1 billion over the, again, I have to remember it's nationally. What was that number way back in the slide? I apologize, I was gonna mark it and, 10.3 billion for California, if I saw it right.
That's for 10.3 billion for California in formula.
Public transportation, does that count as public transportation? Do they get a chunk of that? The High-Speed Rail Authority?
I have not seen anything that says specifically that they're getting funded out of that yet.
Okay.
In the most recent reports, so
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question and something we can track, but I don't know what this. That's the end of my presentation on federal.
Great training session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Any other questions? Are we good?
Thank you to whoever the wizard is behind the curtain that printed out
Yeah.
a bunch of sheets that we could actually see. Appreciate that.
Okay, let's move on to 5.
So number 5, we're going to receive a presentation from Caltrans staff from District 2 about alternative fuels. And we're looking for Drew or Emily.
Yep. Thanks for waiting.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Should put you guys up first.
No, the public comment was pretty interesting. I'd sit through it again.
You didn't sit through it.
So we are part of the systems planning office. You can go to the next slide. This is just an alternative fuels informational overview. We receive direction from federal down to state that goes to headquarters, shoots out to District 2, which we try to make applicable, since we're so rural up here. We try to make that applicable as far as the direction from headquarters federally. So next slide, please. And then we spew that out to our local agencies and we, as Sean talked about, try to allocate funding and make it work up here. I do have a personal disclaimer for this that we created. Caltrans is required to inform all local agencies. Like I had said previously, we get this information federally, it goes down to headquarters, and we as Caltrans District 2 are required to inform our local partners and agencies about these programs that we have been advised via federal. So next slide, please. Funding opportunities, as Sean just talked about. So, like I previously stated, it's federal policy, the Alternative Fuels Corridor Program. It was established by the U.S. Department of Transportation to promote the use of alternative fuel and they've designated alternative fuels corridors and corridor pending. So again, trying to make that work up here. And then these programs aiming to increase the availability of alternative fuels, whether that be propane, hydrogen, natural gas, et cetera, and so forth.
So you're telling us that Sacramento hasn't figured out that what works down there doesn't work up here yet? That's your disclaimer.
That's my disclaimer.
So how is Caltrans, or how is this study going to increase the availability of electricity?
Well, that's a
Coming
very
to
good
that.
question.
Very good question.
That's part of, I have that question as well. So
I have an answer for
we're
it.
trying to, trying to figure that out.
Okay.
So I do have a question, because when we talk about federal policy put out by the Department of Transportation, they're unelected. They're appointed people. Are we really forced to follow a policy from an unelected group?
Isn't that Pete Buttigieg? Buttigieg?
Yeah, he's just an appointed guy.
It's a good question.
So, I mean, are we really forced to go down these paths? Do you feel like we're? Policy and law are two different things, if I understand it right, and I'm not an expert, but I think they're two different things.
Right, it's a tough question.
So we're dealing with policies here, correct? These are federal policies. It says right there on your slide.
It's the goal of the feds for this and for the state. We just want to bring awareness to the different opportunities out there to you guys.
I know, I'm not attacking you.
Of course, no, I understand.
Please understand, it's not a personal attack.
We are here mainly to be a local resource for you all and people that have questions and kind of bridge the gap between headquarters sustainability and our local partners. And we want to be a face for you to ask those questions, and we may not know them right away. It's still an evolving topic. And it's ever changing, but at least you know who you can reach out to answer questions.
But the problem I have as an elected is we're talking about federal and state policy mandates. And when you put mandate on there, now they're telling us that I have to follow an unelected's discretion on how we're going to reorganize our whole fueling system in the whole in the state of California.
Yeah, it's.
So, yeah, I'm going to push back every time, by the way.
Michael, I'm going to say that is probably a question. It's several pay grades higher.
For the assembly.
Absolutely.
Maybe I'll call my assembly.
We're just here for support. Look, hey, I mean, in no way are we backing or, I mean, we're required as state employees. I'm a state employee. That's my job.
Congressman to the next meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Please.
Answer that question.
I mean, yeah, I'd love to show up for that one too.
So I think.
I'm with you though, Mike. I mean, I hear what you're saying, so.
Yeah, it's.
You are really doing a lead-in to staff report agenda item 14 and 15.
Right. So, or, I mean, we're not working with them, but I mean, it's.
Well, I mean, the information you're presenting ties right in.
So.
You stay for items 14 and 15.
I'll try my darndest. Got a little one to pick up.
I can stay.
Okay, so honestly though, this is us just an informational overview. We're not going in depth into any of these topics. This is an ever evolving piece of legislation, have you? And so we're here to just aid in the process, fund allocations, funding opportunities. If you have questions, we can try our darndest to bridge the gap there and try and figure out solutions for this.
But.
Yeah. Anyhow, next slide, please.
Moving right along.
These are some types of alternative fuels that we're looking into as a state that are available. Do you have any questions to that?
Didn't the Fed say that natural gas is now a greenhouse gas and we can't use it anymore?
Sure it is now. Like, don't take my pro.
Here on the end, they put me on the end, and now I'm.
Anyways.
And what about hydrogen being green hydrogen versus black hydrogen?
Ooh, good one.
Well, that's going to be based upon the fuel source you use to produce the hydrogen. So yes, there are different grades of hydrogen based upon what you're using for it.
And so far, we don't have a green one in California.
Coming to Red Bluff. Coming to Red Bluff.
Green in Southern California, they have some where they're working on that right now. It turns into fully 100% renewable energy that then is being used to produce hydrogen at certain levels. But yes, that's that is essentially the epitome or the ultimate goal of those wanting to try to do that.
Right.
Thank you.
It's a hard subject to navigate, even for us. And so, we're just trying to.
You have to throw out common.
Yeah. I'm honestly trying to do my best to understand how it's applicable to all of California. So, next slide, please. So right now, per the federal website here, this is the corridor ready, which is I-5, and then we have corridor pending. So just kind of like a brief picture of what we're looking at as far as corridor ready and corridor pending. And then again, this is an ever evolving piece of legislation. So I know that they're coming out with some new corridor pending areas. And so we will update you as we get the information in our hands. Next slide, please. And then I'm going to hand this over to Drew.
I just wanted, that last slide was for electric vehicle corridors as well. Sean kind of covered the heavy program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. There is alternative fuel corridors that apply to other fuel types such as liquid natural gas, propane, hydrogen, things like that. So there are opportunities out there for that as well. The requirements are a little different than an electric vehicle. I think for all the other ones, it's within, you have to have a station within 5 miles of the interstate for whatever corridor you're talking about. So I don't believe we have any of those locally yet in the district other than electric vehicles, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Next slide, please.
Doesn't it make sense? I mean, every hardware store and gas station on every corner sells propane. Wouldn't propane be the natural?
I think it's a byproduct of natural gas too, isn't it?
I'm not, I think
it is.
I think they're two different animals, but
it was a byproduct.
But I mean, it's like, we're going to electric and we're putting in all these charging stations. You can go to Ace Hardware and get propane.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern.
I mean, we're gonna spend a boatload on infrastructure.
Yep.
Propane, green.
You have a comment?
If I may. So I've worked on some of these corridor programs in other jobs. So the first question on propane is often produced as when we get natural gas, we separate the propane out, which is easier to move than natural gas in the pipelines. But for all these corridors, if you want to be designated for a certain fuel, you talk to Caltrans. So if you want to have a designated propane corridor, you can talk to Caltrans. But the filling your barbecue tank at Ace Hardware, the feds have a differentiation between what they call a secondary station, which is your hardware stores, and a primary station that's more designed to fuel vehicles. But for all these corridors, especially outside of electric, it's kind of a voluntary program where if you want to promote these fuels in your area, you can get designated, and there's programs that help you do that, but it's kind of a voluntary designation that makes you eligible for potentially more federal support to promote fuels along this way.
I believe too, don't quote me on this, but I believe the propane is mainly for off-highway vehicles. Forklifts run propane a lot of times, and there's other ones that have been converted to run propane. But I don't think the goal with that one specifically is for highway travel. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's.
Because it would ruin the electric.
Yeah, that's the way I understand it.
Program.
Yeah. So just wanted to highlight a couple of.
Sorry, Drew.
Tax credit. No, that's okay.
I'll apologize like 15 more times.
So the federal government offers lots of alternative fuel vehicle tax credits, things such as the Clean Cities program to, basically push alt fuels as a resource for people. Next slide, please. There's state policies. You guys might be familiar with some of these. Executive Order N7920. That was the governor's executive order to have 100% of in-state vehicles that are sold in the state for passenger cars and trucks be zero emission by 2035. There's the Clean Transportation Program, Advanced Clean Trucks Act. I didn't want to go too in depth with these, but just wanted to make you folks aware of them. Next slide, please. The state, along with the federal government, they offer certain tax credits and incentives, mostly for the private sector. For people buying an electric car or something like that, they can usually get a state tax credit, or they offer incentives like Clean Vehicle Rebate Project and things like that, as well as some zero emission transit funding, which I believe there's an agenda item later on that topic, but just wanted to bring it to your attention here. Next slide, please. And then like we kind of got into earlier, we just want to talk about what our role is in all this. And we just want to bridge that gap between headquarters and District 2 on the more local level. And like I said, be a resource for questions, concerns, and anything that comes up, technical questions, funding questions, things like that. Next slide. So here we just have some contact information. Our office chief, Aaron Cassis, couldn't be here today. But there's Emma's and my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions that come up. And then next slide, which I believe is our last slide, we have some links and resources you guys can take a look at if you kind of want to dive a little deeper into this on your own. And then feel free to reach out to us with any questions. Other than that, I think that's all we have. Do you guys have any other questions for us?
You can play the alumni game next year.
Questions through Mr. Teagan.
Okay.
What can I ask one quick, do we know if the Has the state or Caltrans heard, does this N79-20, which is simply an executive order from the governor, has that been pushed through legislature? Does anybody in the room know? Or are we still just riding on an executive order from
I think it's still.
favorite people?
I think it still currently exists, yes.
These are the things we need to change, people as electeds. That should be the case, by the way.
There's nothing
Not
to
up to
stop
you.
it from passing.
Well, that's true. I was literally thinking, Greg, you're bringing it up. It's like, well, this legislature will ram it through because they're a super majority. So with fear and trembling, well done, by the way. Thanks, you guys.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you guys for having us. We
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah. And again, I mean, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out, but we're just in the learning stages here and we're just trying to do our best.
Go back and tell Aaron next time it's you, whoever. That's not fair.
The wolves next.
I'm saying mine flash.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Emily.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Difficult.
Do you have more to talk about? You don't have to stay.
All right. Hey, thank you all for having me.
You have somebody to pick up, go ahead.
I know.
Yeah, this one's gonna go a while, so see ya. Mr. Watkins has all kinds of notes.
Okay, we are moving on to the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the agency votes on the motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
So are you saying we can't pull an item for discussion?
Hey, but what one?
What would you like to pull?
Well, I have just some clarification questions on 4, 5, and 8.
Okay, let's move 4, 5, and 8 off the calendar.
Do we have to pull them? Maybe he could just ask his question
One.
and we could still vote on them as one.
Fine.
It's gonna be discussion.
All right, pull them off, 4, 5, and 8. We have a motion to approve the consent calendar minus items 7-4, 7-5, and 7-8. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Amy?
Can you repeat the second, please, Chair Mazzano?
Jones.
Jones was the second.
Okay.
Hey, look who's back.
Keep it moving.
Hello, Tessa.
Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Roll call vote to approve the consent calendar minus items 7-4, 7-5, and 7-8.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Board Member Audette?
Yes.
Board Member Cry?
Yes.
Board Member Gallagher?
Yes.
Board Member Jones?
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom?
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano?
Yes.
Board Member Watkins?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
I'll approve. Motion carries. All right, let's go to 7-4. Discussion. Move to the regular calendar.
I think that I have just a clarifying question on the bottom of the page of the report of the disbursements. The energetics amount, is that the amount that was used for, oh shoot, I should have made a better note.
35,232.51.
Yeah, is that, oh shoot. On item, it's attached to item number 14. Was that, we partnered with Energetics to give us item 14. Was that the cost? Clarifying that, was that the cost of the report?
Partial payment. That's a progress payment.
On this item though? Is it on item?
The cash disbursement item at the bottom of the list, check number 4814 was delivered on 5/11 to Energetics for a progress payment towards the ICT plan. It is the same project, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah, I
is the
just,
same project, but that is partial.
okay. And we have somewhere, spend on,
Yes.
The ICT, yes, that would have been at the beginning when we did the, entered into the technical services agreement at the beginning.
We have a contract that the board had approved for roughly around 150,000.
Okay, that number rings a bell. Thank you. I just, for the life of me, I could not recall, so thank you for that. On the
7-5.
couple of things, just bear with me. So on the first page of those graphs, we have at the top in the black and white boxes, we have 2.145 million for non-motorized program, and we have 2.226 million regional service transportation. First off, can we do a quick definition of non-motorized program? Just to clarify.
So the non-motor, this is cash balances in our bank accounts. So
Okay.
Your non-moto is with UMQA and your RSTP is with Five Star Bank. So these are literal cash balances that accrue both the deposits, each annual distribution of the funds, and any payments that were made to the jurisdictions. So the non-motorized program typically includes the TDA budget that was given year over year.
Okay.
And the RSTP program also is an annual program. We just approved on consent the project list for that, and it's been roughly around 2 million.
Okay.
This is the bank account that holds all those funds. Most of those grant funds are going to specify that you need to hold them in their own accounts.
Got it. And regional surface transportation programs, that's just, I'm sorry I have to ask so many times. I really do apologize, but I want to understand. That's why I asked.
RSTP is a federal program.
Okay.
That we then exchange those funds for
Got it.
state-only funds to be able to lessen the administrative burden of people applying for them.
And those are where we have designated projects, and I believe there's 3 of them that made the cut on this.
No, each jurisdiction is going to get an allocation of the RSTP program based on population.
Okay.
The county gets a little bit extra that they exchange separately. And then Anderson gets a dock of 15 grand a year for 12 years.
Like 174
Yeah.
incomes, I think is our number. Does that sound right? Something like that. Okay. Okay, so on the next page, I don't see page numbers on, so the following page, I want to just clarify that in our planning, we have strategic partnerships for the State Route 273 corridor plan, and budgeted 500,000 for this year.
Yep.
And right underneath that, North State Intercity Bus to Rail for 288,000. I see there's zero, I see we haven't spent any of those monies, is that correct? There's the zero in the revenues column.
Yes.
We got the budget on the left and we've got revenues next to that. Is that?
This is the money coming in. So both of these are part of our consolidated planning grant program that is billed through the overall work program. We do request for reimbursements on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
Both of these projects had not had spending up to this reporting period, and therefore there had not been reimbursements either. So that is why the revenue, the column there is showing a 0.
Okay, but we budgeted those 2 amounts for those 2
For the entire
items
year.
for the year. And then do we add that to, okay, go 2 pages now. Do we add that? I see where we have overall work program numbers. So we've got 707 multimodal corridor plan for 630,000. Is that?
So that's going to include that planning grant fund of 500,000 plus our local match obligation. So that's why you have a 630 number there, because our expenditures are going to include the total expenditures
Okay.
that are planned in the overall work
So
program.
total budgeted for that project is 630. That includes the 500,000 on the previous page. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
It's not 1.1 million.
I just want to be clear that you're comparing revenues versus expenditures. So the revenue side, we're getting 500,000 from that strategic partnership program. from that funding program. And then our expenditures on that project are budgeted at 630 because that includes the 500,000 that we're getting from the strategic partnership
Okay.
and the extra local match we have to add, whether that's state funds or any other non-federal funds.
Okay, so the question is, that's for this calendar year.
So again, the note at the top in bold on the notes section, for the first funding years of a new grant, you have to program the grant in its entirety, regardless of what your actual revenue and expenses are gonna be for that fiscal year. And that's just part of the red tape type rules we have to follow. So in subsequent years, you might see more realistic numbers of what we can accomplish in a given fiscal year, July 1 to June 30.
So is that the total number that we're gonna spend on planning?
Entire project,
73, that's the project amount.
that's what we have so far.
For SRTA's portion of it, there's.
Yes.
On 273, there's another element of another $500,000 that Caltrans was awarded. So when we went for the 273 multimodal corridor plan, we went for two grants, two competitive planning grants are set aside.
Okay.
SRTA went for half of it, for half of the 273 corridor.
Okay.
And that was identified as like the south section. And Caltrans District 2 went for another $500,000 for the north half of the corridor. Vice versa. We both got funded, so we can now do the planning for the whole corridor. That is a separate thing. Caltrans manages that funds. We are the entity that manages the contract. As expenses are made, we will get reimbursed from Caltrans from their half.
And that's where you might be remembering the 1.1 number.
It's
the
fiscal,
1.1 million.
not calendar. You said calendar, it's fiscal year. He needs to make sure.
Okay. Okay, I hope it's a good plan. Thank you.
7,
And do you need to do, is there,
Well, we do all three.
or you can do all three of those at once, or do you need to do your actions individual?
Let's go ahead and do 7, 8.
Yeah.
Do a vote for all three.
All right.
Yeah, Jen is the lead on the project, so if you have questions, you can direct them to her.
Okay,
Sorry, Jen Pollum, Senior Transportation Planner for the record.
welcome, John, thanks. Okay, so when I look at the Sunday on-demand transit trips graph, I looked at it for a while, so give me a little grace here, but I'm just struggling with, if we look at July 2022, we started with 351 total passenger trips for that's 4 Sundays. I'm at 4 or 5 Sundays, whatever many there was. Okay.
And excluding holidays.
And when I look down at April, it's 283. At our average daily passenger trips, and it's probably a simple question or an answer, but for 351 passenger trips, we only had 70. And for 283, which is 68 trips less for the month, daily passenger trips is 71. And I'm struggling with that because when I look next, does our ride sharing trip percentage have anything to do with that? Or I don't want to confuse it, but it's.
Ride sharing is when there's more than one.
Yeah, but I read that and I thought I could comprehend what I was reading. So am I?
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that. I could check the table that this comes from because it's, a mathematical equation and there'd be a problem in there, but I imagine that if 4th of July holiday affected anything, I'll just check the days in there.
I can see we're December at 126 passenger trips.
Okay.
Say that again.
For April.
And there might have been 5 Sundays.
I'm guessing there was probably 5 Sundays in July.
So what we have, Dignity Health has a number of different days where depending on what they have, they might not operate. So if there was holidays or anything else that played into that, where they had a non-operation day. We also had one, we had it where we knew the system was actually going to be down. With VA having to do a bunch of upgrades to software, so we didn't operate that day. We didn't notice because it was not.
But if you didn't operate on a Sunday, wouldn't that lower your average daily passenger trips or would it increase?
If you had Sundays.
It means that there's,
You're gonna have more.
Yeah, more because you've got less days to develop.
All right. Okay, this was, I try to read your information, by the way. I try to make sense of it. So so on the next one, on our weekly on-demand rideshare service trips, you could just define reverse trip for me and that might start to help.
During the COVID pandemic, it was a way to get people groceries and like their prescriptions where they wouldn't actually have to go to the pharmacy. So they would say, I need to pick this up. And the Dignity Health Connect Living would go and pick up their groceries or pick up their prescriptions and take it to their home instead of taking the person to the store to get it.
Oh, interesting.
And we have, let's see, so we stopped that for a while. You can see that in July and August at the top there. So we had stopped the reverse transit trips, but they were still having requests for them. Who is one of their, people that are their normal riders, the car wasn't working. Snow, I think we actually considered during the winter time with more snow out there that they might need more trips. So we picked it back up and actually they're reviewing that to see who was using those reverse trips and if it was being used in the way that we wanted it to be done for like those examples I just said, where somebody couldn't get to the pharmacy or to the grocery store. But now their Dignity Health Connect Living is doing a review of those and we would expect them to taper off now.
Me too. When there's multiple other organizations that do that, call any grocery store now and get your groceries delivered to your front doorstep. So I'm not sure we should be running a van up and down the road to do that. Secondly, I know North Bay Transit is all about medical. So I would assume that they would engage in that process. So I'm not sure we should be doing those kind of things with our service. So thank you for explaining that. That clears up a lot for me.
And I'll add to that, there are a couple of questions we do have with staff in terms of what they've allowed the use of the reverse trips for. So there may be a partial audit, we may do a couple different months to make sure that the trips submitted are actually eligible for the funding. It might be a reference.
Are we gonna wait till October to find that out, I'm assuming?
No, we do, it's an annual, so like we would do an audit at the end of the fiscal year, so in July.
Okay. We don't have another meeting scheduled until October if I saw the special. Are we gonna have a special meeting in July or August?
August.
August 31st at 3 o'clock.
That is scheduled?
According to the consent items that were just approved.
Okay, I'm just, on the agenda, it says October, so I'm just making sure.
Yeah, we have now approved the future meetings calendar, which includes the special meeting.
That August one.
31st.
It's my anniversary. I'll be happy to be here, by the way. We'll go to dinner afterward. Thank you.
Discussion, the chair will entertain a motion to approve items 7-4, 7-5, and 7-8 previously on the
So moved.
consent calendar. And we move for discussion.
Second.
First from Mr. Watkins, second from Patrick. Do a roll call vote, please.
Great, thank you. Board Member Audette?
Yes.
Board Member Cry?
Yes.
Board Member Gallagher?
Yes.
Board Member Jones?
Yes.
Board Member
Sorry,
Kelsey?
I'm on a board. I'm like in a hotel in San Luis Obispo. We're doing the nuclear plant walkthrough tomorrow, and I'm also on the board.
Vanessa, you are not on mute.
Doesn't
Vanessa.
understand.
Oh, I'm afraid she's gonna say something she doesn't.
He just cut her off. That's
Okay,
good.
thank you, Michael.
Sorry, Board Member Mazzano
Yes.
and Board Member Watkins.
Yes.
Great, thank you, everybody.
Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you all.
Let's move on to the regular calendar. Item number 8, the Executive Director's Report is an information item only.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try to make this brief for everyone. Just a couple of things. One is to mention, yes, we do have on the schedule tentatively as a special meeting on August 31st to potentially have on agenda the discussion of the draft regional transportation plan and a couple other financial items that we'll bring before you then. As we get closer and confirm, we will let everyone know and that's confirmed or send out any notices if there's a revised date that needs to be done for that. But we plan for that at this point for now, as it is on the schedule. Also, the board members, you had given you an update. We had some good news in relation to the Fixed Gateway project. SRTA and Caltrans last fall had submitted a joint application requesting over $70 million in Trade Corridor Enhancement Program funding for that corridor. We received a notice on June 8th that the California Transportation Commission staff is recommending that the CTC board approve funding for that project for $70 million. So we're really excited with that. I want to thank Caltrans for a lot of work that they did. A lot of their staff really struggled through and just went through lots of brainstorming to figure out how we could make the project meet the really rigorous grant requirements that we were having to deal with, how to make it competitive with some of the challenges that we were running if comments at the state level and how to have a project that work. So kudos to them for all the work that they did to come up with that. Kudos to all the different staff trying to figure out how to meet all the little, check the boxes of all the points to meet the requirements to get all the points we could. We're happy with that. Overall, just over 70 million, 16.9 of that is towards SRTA for the regional side and almost 53.9 million for the state portion that was requested. We still are looking to see if support for the freight infrastructure program application also was submitted. The whole goal of that was to actually offset some of the TSET funds potentially to fund some other components that at the moment Caltrans might have to absorb as part of some of their programs. So it would provide a little bit more flexibility, free some of the money into their programs to be able to use across the region. So we have not heard yet on whether or not any of the important freight infrastructure program funding was supported. A couple different bill updates for you briefly. AB 6, which was a bill by State Assemblywoman Friedman, has turned into a 2-year bill. What that means is essentially that bill will not be heard this year, it will be heard again next year. It's been delayed to be brought back up. The significance of that bill is a couple different things. One, it would add an additional 2045 year target to our regional transportation plan for greenhouse gas emission targets that would then have to be reviewed and directed by CARB on what that target would be. It also would have actually had some language built into it that would have weakened the limits on CARB's review of a regional transportation plan and MDS on whether or not it would meet the GHG reduction targets. Weakened is not a good thing. It would mean they'd give them more flexibility and would not constrain them so much as yes or no and does it work. CalCog, Bill Higgins and his staff at CalCog are working heavily, as well as the self-help counties coalitions to really try to put some pressure on getting amendments to the language or not. But that will be one we'll be continuing to track next year. It's been essentially delayed and will no longer move forward this year.
So, Sean, did you say this bill was going to weaken CARB's authority somewhat?
It doesn't weaken their authority. It weakens the restrictions and limits on what their review is supposed to be on. So it would have actually broadened their responsibility. They would have had more leeway in their review process.
Yeah, they don't need more leeway.
No, I agree.
How about we just
it's already pretty
eliminate?
well prescribed, and so there's a lot of concern between MPOs across the state of that there's SB 375 was near enough or was broad enough in what it was, and we want to keep it there and everything. So there's a lot of concern there. So, but this is essentially delayed till next year. We'll continue to track it. Another bill, AB 7, also by Assemblywoman Friedman. This one is a concern still this year because it's still kind of moving forward, but it could turn into a 2-year bill. It could get delayed. It could just die and have to come back. But it will require adding an extra 18 principles, which there's this long list, that the California Transportation Commission, Caltrans, and CalSTA would have to use in their review of project development, selection, and implementation. So it adds a whole nother process that we would have to try to go through. There's several problems with it. One, the different principles and language are too ambiguous. The references to various programs or policies could create conflicts because of other statutes and policies the state already has, where they get updated. Now you've got multiple things referencing different stuff, and now you're saying, okay, as a regional agency, when in a regional transportation plan or other projects, I've got conflicts, so that it opens you up for legal challenge, right? And so that's a challenge. And it's just, frankly, it's too broad. Her language and everything that is there. CalCog did talk about this at our last board meeting and essentially has an oppose and unless amended position. And that's across the board, the regional agencies support that on that end. So we'll continue to track and see what happens there.
Sean, can I ask you a question on that? Is CalCog our only representative? Let me preface or add to, I know you're engaged with CalCog, and I appreciate that, but how much local representation are we actually getting down there in Sacramento? Or are we relying on just CalCog and with them?
There's a number of organizations. So your CSAC use in California League of Cities also, their members and stuff really try to advocate. There's a number, a lot of times, especially with the nuances of some of these bills and what's being done in the language, we are sometimes, working with our other MTO partners that have dedicated staff to this to really keep hammering everything. For us, CalCog has a great representative to take the collective voice of all the regions, and there's a lot of impact behind that to be able to do so, at least at the regional level. But they do work with the self-help coalitions and others also on some of these issues, because local jurisdictions don't want to have to deal with more regulation and have to be forced to do more things.
Yeah,
And
they're killing us.
agencies don't want them forcing additional parameters or supposed, authority that we don't really technically have, but we're supposed to plan for it and everything. So there's all these problems. So those are some of the other groups that we work with on a regular basis, besides individually getting involved in stuff and providing input. So.
We need to be an army.
Yep, no, I agree. In terms of Brown Act bills, there's been no traction so far on several bills that have been proposed that would potentially revise the Brown Act to provide more flexibility specifically to regional boards and the local elected officials that serve on them. A lot of discussion has been about across the board too, is that local elected officials, whether you're in a rural area at times because of weather and other challenges, or even some of the big city areas, local elected officials, you sit on a number of different boards, and that can be challenging if you've got all these boards within short timeframes of each other. So there's been a bit of discussion about allowing more revisions of the Brown Act for remote participation in those things, so people could sit on those different boards and have the input that you elected officials are trying to fulfill as your duties that everyone votes for you to take on and do. There hasn't been much traction there. There's one bill that maybe still, but most of it we're not very encouraged at this point for any potential revisions that we might see. So we'll keep an eye on that. And last, state budget. There's not a state budget yet. The state legislature last week until June 15th did pass a budget, but it was a broad outline budget with a lot of details at this point on party lines. It kind of essentially let the state legislature still get paid while they debate everything, because their deadline was June 15th. The only thing real notable in what we've seen so far is it's a proposed $312 billion spending plan. And they have put in provisions to go back to making sure that public transit, which was a big issue across the board, to reverse some of the things the Governor Newsom proposed for making some different cuts or spreading some things out. There's still a lot that's going to happen on that side. There's a lot of unknowns, so we just continue to track and see what comes up. The one thing I have seen as well in terms of the state transportation programs and funding is two things. One, we're still hearing and seeing from Caltrans headquarters and others that transportation revenue from our fuel taxes at the state level that come in are still on par with last year's revenue. That is still on par. So we're not seeing much, if any, of a drop. It's right in there where we've been. This is even as of last month. The other thing that we're seeing is that there may be some different fund swaps between some programs that originally had general fund funds allocated to some programs that might get swapped with some other state programs. But it's still too soon to see if those swaps will take place or something and what that means. Pretty much we're gonna have to wait until July until those are budget, and then we know the actual impact. So we're tracking to see if there's any significant changes. I'm not anticipating any at the moment. There's a lot of discussion on the transit funding operations side. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Sean.
On Sean.
On item 9, the SRTA's board members report on the attendance at conference meetings reimbursed at SRTA expense. It's information item only. Vanessa, are you there?
Yes.
And do you have a CalCog report that you attended a meeting or?
No, we did it by Zoom.
Okay, all right.
And I do, if it makes you feel any better, Mike, they are all up and down this, sorry, I'm yelling in the lobby. All up and down the state, they are fighting the same fight. There isn't, I haven't heard from a single entity in the different meetings that we've been in that are happy about the stuff that's coming out of the state. And I think they're advocating pretty hard, and not just us and not just rural areas, but even down in Southern California, a lot of the things that are coming out of Sacramento just don't work. And they're going pretty fast and furious to do it. So there's a lot of pushback. I think CalCog's doing a really good job of pushing back and offering alternatives and trying to work with the legislators to delay before they've make decisions like that. So I actually have been quite impressed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move to item number 10, discuss and approve holding future board meetings at the SRTA's office. I think today's meeting went well despite the crowd. We had a discussion about it at the executive board, fiscal and policy, and we lean towards holding the meetings here for a couple of reasons. One, example, parking that we don't have to pay for, as I look at my public works director, and the ability to run these meetings with Zoom is really nice here. But we'll entertain comments from the board on this idea. Anybody have any objection to that? It doesn't require a vote, it's an information only.
This does require a vote.
This would be an action item because the board.
My bad, I'm sorry, you're right, it is an action item. So if there's no.
Make a motion, we hold the meetings here.
We have a motion from Mr. Fry. It's seconded by Mr. Kellstrom.
Discussion.
Okay.
One of the points you make in here is that board, like Odette can do it from remotely. And that's good, but she also has an alternative, backup person that could come and be in person. So I don't think that is a reason to keep doing it here just so we can have Zoom. We didn't have any Zoom meeting from outside. We had people come in and present an overhead, and I think that's good. So I think part of the justification, we have never lacked a quorum to be able to have a meeting. And so I just think some of the justifications to keep meeting here are not valid anymore.
I would recognize that. I'll go with parking. We have a first and a second. Amy?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Vanessa.
Oh, I thought it was a parking issue as well. I thought we could have Zoom in any of the locations that we're at. I thought it was mainly a parking issue, so.
Okay, Amy, go ahead.
Okay, we'll call for roll call. Board Member Audette?
Yes.
Board Member Cry?
Yes.
Board Member Gallagher?
Yes.
Board Member Jones?
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom?
Yes.
Board Member Lozano?
Yes.
And Board Member Watkins?
Maybe.
Take that as a yes. All in favor?
A qualified yes.
Carries.
Thanks, everyone.
I think, Mr. Watkins, it's important to policy committee with Vanessa and Chair Mazzano, this can be changed.
Yeah.
If it needs to come up as an item, we'll change it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
we'll go after it. So.
Yeah, and there's always opportunity too, that if, we identify in the future, hey, there's some other needs that, hey, we've got to move to different location, we can always look at that, look for what the opportunities are for as.
Number 11.
So,
Yeah.
yep.
Item number 11, approve and update the SRTA Human Resources Policy and Procedures. Is that you, Sean?
Yes. Sean, yes.
That will be me. Thank you, Chair, on this one. Most of the edits that you see that are suggested here are more to make sure that the human resource policies are consistent with federal and state law. A little bit more administrative to handle per board policy. You have direction for me to be able to do that, to review it, legal counsel, and just update those to be consistent. However, one policy change that the state of California did does have some discretion between the board to decide what you want to do with it. And because that is a board level discussion, is presented here for you to review, discuss, and approve how you'd like to move forward.
That's on page 58, by the way.
Yes, and that is related to the bereavement policy, which is on page 58 of the attachment, with some suggested text that you have, and I'll summarize where we are at. So there's current policy, well, let me say this. California law now requires employers to provide up to 5 days of bereavement leave for individuals as long as they've at least been employed for 30 days at the employer's location. And any accrued paid time off may be used towards unpaid bereavement leave. So this current policy allows up to 24 hours or 3 days of paid bereavement leave for full-time employees. And then an additional 2 days that may be charged to get sick time. The first 3 days, it is a full pay benefit, does not get charged to any type of paid time off. So this policy also provides a prorated leave amount for full-time employees that work between 30 and 40 hours. There is no benefit provided to employees working less than 30 hours. Currently is the policy that has been written. At Fiscal and Policy, staff have reviewed and presented a recommendation to consider providing up to 5 days of paid time off for bereavement leave only for full-time employees without an impact to their PTO. There was some discussion with the Fiscal and Policy with general supported recommendation, but they did ask staff for additional information, which is provided on page 2. Staff did a review of both local agencies as well as some of the comparable agencies that can get back to us in the timeframe that we review for benefits, pay, those types of things, and that includes Placer, Tulare, Butte, and Madera, to see what their policies had and if they had updated them as well, or what their existing policy just was. Most of those, you will see that they provide at least 3 days of paid time off that does not impact PTO and employees PTO, and some also do 5. In review of the policies and how things are written, there are 2 other staff recommendations for the board to discuss and consider. That is also to clarify and allow full-time employees to take up to 40 hours of additional leave using an employee's available PTO related to the bereavement qualifying event. There is an alternative that the board could consider instead, where you would keep it, the bereavement leave policy, at the current 3 days of paid time and clarify that an employee could use up to an additional 56 hours of their own PTO for time off for qualifying events. So if someone said, hey, I've had a death in my family, I need to handle stuff, I need to take 2 weeks off, and you could say, okay, 3 days is paid on the agency, the other time is available to use your PTO, go handle your matters, and we will see you when you get back. Those are the kind of couple of the suggestions on the full-time employee side. Another recommendation in addressing part-time employees that are working less than 30 hours is to do a prorated share of their bereavement paid time up to a maximum of 18 hours. That would not count against their PTO, and then allow up to an additional 30 hours using available PTO that they've accrued. Part of looking at it also is saying, okay, if an employee has been here 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, maybe they've been here 6 months, and they've unfortunately had a loved one or someone die in their family, they're not going to have much PTO available. Providing at least some paid time off gives them some relief as they deal with the situation they found themselves in to get through it and everything, which is why I am suggesting is, looking at the 5 days, but there's other options I'm presenting for the 3 day only option if you want it. The only thing I would say there on the PTO and paid time is it's an indirect expense that the agency does recruit through our indirect cost allocation plan. With that, I will hand it over to the chair for discussion with the board at your pleasure.
So there's a decision, folks. 3 days or 5 days of paid leave. And, I think the thing you have to consider is that for a lot of our staff, how many employees are we talking about?
8.
8 employees. So it doesn't really hit us that hard, but certainly the loss of an immediate family member that might even require out-of-state travel I don't have a heartburn with 5 days, but I'll leave it to the majority here. On accommodating staff.
I'd make the motion for the 5 days. I think people work hard here, and if something bad happens, they should.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Gallagher to approve the 5 days, a second by Mr. Kellstrom. Do a roll call vote, please.
Great. Board Member Audette?
Yes.
Board Member Cry?
Yes.
Board Member Gallagher?
Yes.
Board Member Jones? And
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom?
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano?
Yes.
Board Member Watkins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Okay, moving on to item 12, we have public comment. So I'm going to open up for public comment. Then we'll move into discussion by the board.
On the right item?
Yeah, 12.
Yeah, 12.
However he wants to do it. I'm not worried about the order. Go ahead.
You know,
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. I was just asked to attend and hear what you guys have to say, if that's all right. I think it's all good. We've met.
Oh, did you not want to provide any comment on the item? The card you filled out
I
was.
was asked to fill out the card.
Oh, okay.
oh, okay. And we will close public comment.
Yes.
And now we'll move to discussion.
I wanted to take your shot right there. I'm just, there's that. No, I'm kidding.
Let's keep it up.
So I'll be covering this item for the board's consideration. We worked closely with staff after we approved the TDA budget last meeting in April. And we did find some formula errors in our Excel spreadsheet that we were using to make that budget. So I worked with staff from RABA, staff from the city of Reading, and staff from the county of Shasta to make sure that we took a fine tooth comb to that. And we did end up finding an extra $1.4 million in streets and roads LTF funding for the jurisdiction. So that should be good news for everybody. And ultimately, region-wide, we are dispersing an additional 1.3 million. Again, this is a budget. This all has to do with how much we ultimately get into the region in LTF and STA funding, local transportation funding, and state transit assistance roll into the Transportation Development Act, which is what gives us these funds from the state. And these are part of the state taxes to gas and diesel and sales tax. Anyway, so that's just kind of an administrative order. So I'm asking for you guys to approve the revised budget so that we can fill out the claims before June 30th for each of the jurisdictions claimants. And then those payment instructions, item 2 is what comes along with that. I send that over to the auditor controller. That's a regulation from TDA. We do the budget, they do the disbursement of payments, and they receive the TDA funds from the state. 3, again, is another thing that we add on to any TDA budget, just in case we find minor administrative amendments, the executive director is able to approve those. And then lastly, item 4, we have John Ando, transit manager from RABA here today that can speak to any of your questions. But ultimately, RABA is making a request on our STA reserve funds that we have allocated thus far through the TDA budget process each year. We have in that budget document from the consent item 7.5, a amount of STA reserve funds that have been accruing year over year that have yet to be requested upon by any of the TDA claimants. So RABA has submitted a request to the claimants that you would approve the disbursement of $90,000 in support of their grant award efforts to provide a pilot alternative for the Veterans Home, the Veterans Clinic, the airport, and other stops on Knighton Road, which are detailed in his request and in the staff report. The only detail I would say is that we are requesting a one-time payment of $90,000 from the previously reserved funds from other audited years of TDA funding rather than incorporating it into the TDA budget. For two reasons. One, they get the $90,000 right away in a lump sum rather than dispersed monthly through a payment process. And they also will not be subject to any true up. So we will not have them subject to that budget true up in 2 years and waivering their $90,000 ask. So I'm recommending and staff is recommending that 90,000 straight from the 1.6 million we have in the county treasury today.
And when will that new route start, if we approve this?
The goal is August.
Okay. Well, I would make a motion to approve then, because we need to get a bus up there to the VA clinic.
Okay.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Of course.
I'm curious, it was a rhetorical question I asked, if I could ask a question, by the way, just for the record. Why are we so concerned about duplicating services for veterans? I'm a little challenged on that particular part of the report. I mean, my goodness, we were picking up groceries, but we're gonna limit access to veterans in the area. So in order to reduce duplication of service, ShastaConnect would reduce services to the veterans home, VA clinic, and other stops to only those trips originating outside the modified RABA service area Monday through Friday. Due to next paragraphs, due to technical constraints, service software provider will need 6 to 8 weeks to test and implement the necessary changes. Like, why would, I think we're jumping through hoops that don't make sense to me when it comes to veterans.
We're not limiting any service. It's not that type of duplication. What we're trying to avoid is the same rider calling on both services. They both show up and use the resources to get there, and the rider gets on the first one to show up.
Because
So those resources are spent.
Thank you. Because the deviated means that you can actually, they can go off route and pick somebody up if they request it. Is that correct?
Quarters of a mile by request,
Okay.
24 hours to 2 weeks in advance.
Do we feel like that's going to be a huge problem with veterans? Like, is that going to be a real, I mean, I'm going to say this is going to be really dangerous, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think there's other demographics, groups of people in our demographic that would be more of a problem with that, maybe.
I would say I'm not trying to assume any intent or whatever by any individual group.
No, not at all.
But part of what we want to do is, here's the thing. You don't also want to have it where someone has a preference. Maybe they've been using ShastaConnect and been, using CTSA service for a long time and they're used to that. But yet we're adding another service up there. So you want to be able to make sure that the services are appropriately successful and make them as successful as possible. Because if you have a duplication of service, you may have a bunch of people like, okay, I'm just going to pick ShastaConnect because I'm used to it. Rather than taking RABA, we've asked RABA to do a service out there, and they can actually provide a trip to that individual. And you're not allowing the RABA service to do what our intent of it is, to see if it can be successful, see if it meets the needs and the ridership that takes place.
And right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it takes 24-hour notice to get them a ride to the clinic right now, right? I mean, there's not a set bus route, and this is.
So this will be a set route, and then the deviated route, the deviated request, which is 3/4 of a mile off of that route, can be requested where it would be a door-to-door or curb-to-curb.
But right now, they have to give a day's notice or more to get a ride to the clinic.
Or they can show up at the bus stop and jump right on and go.
Well, there is no bus that goes there on a regular basis, right?
Yes, no, that's what they're asking.
Allow that.
You're going to have bus.
I know.
Okay.
That's, yes.
He's
Right now, there
clarifying
is.
for Mike.
The 90,000 will allow us to have a regular bus route.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And to clarify, the 90,000 is a match.
Right.
For the full program pilot is proposed at 190,000. Yeah, John?
Okay, I mean, I would worry about duplication if it was me. It's just I don't think.
You want to make your comment now?
That's going to be a huge problem, number one. And number two, I mean, we subsidize other stuff, like, don't get me started. So we're talking about the veterans, right? This is to provide routes to veterans.
Okay, so the primary purpose is to address what's come up as a need to unmet transit need process to address people that need to the veterans clinic. But the RABA route is going to serve more than just veterans. It's also going to serve the general public. It's also going to serve people that are have a disability that can ride the service in terms of that would be eligible for demand response ADA service as well. So it's not just addressing them, although the primary purpose of us talking about it and trying to come up with a solution has been to deal with the other elements that currently ShastaConnect has not been able to, for veteran needs to get up to the clinic with different times, and also the homeless, right? Because the on-demand service requires you to have the ability to have a phone or have a tablet or a smart device to book rides. And versus the fixed route does provide a schedule, so anyone that is aware of can get on at one of those stops and try to get to and do some planning to get to the clinic back.
But it's going to the Veterans Clinic. I mean, that's the
It is
destination.
one of these stops on the route.
There are several, but it's also going to the airport.
It is going to the airport.
And it will be able to take people from the downtown area to visit veterans at the veterans facility,
Correct,
not just the vets.
correct.
Okay. I just would prefer it doesn't hold up the process. If that's what we're worried about, I'd probably would have went the other way and said, let's get it going ASAP and we'll see how much overlap or how much it's, and then
And we
make an
may have
adjustment
it
then.
still, depending on the software side for the ShastaConnect stuff, it's just what the vendor
talking-
said. But the timing is actually consistent, roughly
Mr. Gallagher,
around.
I can assure you that the route's starting regardless of ShastaConnect's technical.
Okay.
We're planning August. And then, of course, this still goes before RABA board on Monday as well for consideration.
And I just wanted to add, John, what my staff's gonna do with you. Our social work team today just reached out to me while I was here. They've got a private donor that wants to purchase bus passes for this route. And our social work team says they can probably commit to 80 bus passes a month, which is gonna help also try to fund it. So we can't just give money out, but we can purchase passes to the veterans.
Beautiful.
So that's a lot more than I knew yesterday, but that's 80 bus passes plus a private donor wanting to buy it. And I know other VSOs, the only thing I'd ask is when we know what a date is, we want to advertise it with you, we want to get it out in all of our meetings. We want to get it out to the veteran service officers because they're the ones that have been really pushing and everything. In the state home, I know we've met with the state home. And so as soon as we get a date, we want to help you power blast all this information.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, there's no further discussion. We have a motion from Mr. Kellstrom. Do I have a second?
I think, did Supervisor Craig, did you second that?
No.
I'll second.
Amy, Mr. Kellstrom, motion and second by Mr. Jones. Roll call vote, please.
Wonderful, thank you. Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Cry,
Yes.
Board Member Gallagher,
Yes.
Board Member Jones,
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Watkins.
Yes.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Okay, moving on, you'll note that we skip item 13.
Thank you for coming, sir.
Superstitious. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 14, please. Approve zero-emission fleet transition rollout plan for the ShastaConnect services.
Thank you. We have Metzi here, our associate transportation planner, and we also have Kevin from Energetics, our consultant on this plan.
If you will.
Thank you very much. SRTA has partnered with DHCL to provide ShastaConnect services in order to comply with the state and federal regulations on transitioning to zero-emission vehicles. SRTA has contracted Energetics to prepare a zero-emission fleet transition rollout plan. And the plan outlines 3 options for transitioning the fleet, converting to fully battery electric vehicles, a full hydrogen fleet, or a mixed battery electric and hydrogen fleet. Adoption of the plan will make SRTA and DHCL eligible for federal and state funding programs. So it is recommended that the Board of Directors approve the plan according to Resolution 2307 and direct the Executive Director to submit the plan to CARB and make minor administrative changes as needed. We have Kevin here today from Energetics to talk about this plan. Kevin, please.
Cool. Thank you, Mehdi, for the introduction, and thank you, Chair Mazzano and members of the board for receiving me today. Next slide. the quick agenda, we're gonna, some of this is review I presented at the last board meeting, so I'll go through a few of these slides quickly, but as some of you have learned about me, I'm happy to chat about this if you've got more questions. So we'll talk about the technology choices, the infrastructure that will be required, the transition schedule that's proposed, some workforce development activities. And that's one of the state and federal requirements is to talk about what the workforce impacts of this transition will be and talk about what some of the challenges faced in the transition. And there was a resolution included in the board packet that we'll want action on it at the end of this. So next slide. Just as the overview again, the ICT regulation is a requirement of the Air Resources Board to an earlier question under the Federal Clean Air Act and state laws. The Air Resources Board has the authority to ask for these sorts of things. Specifically for the innovative clean transit, what the ask is zero emission vehicles, which are hydrogen or battery electric. There are other good alternative fuel options available, but for transit, the zero emission fuel choices are electric or hydrogen. And SRTA is the responsible agency for the ShastaConnect service. And that requirement is 25% of new vehicle purchases starting in 2026 and 100% of new vehicle purchases starting in 2029, zero emission. Next slide. This graph outlines those kind of scenarios that Mehdi introduced. You could go full battery electric, you could go full fuel cell or some combination. And we are looking at a combined scenario based on both the technology readiness and the costs associated with it. So in the upper right-hand corner is kind of a mapping of what we call trips, but this is the full day operations of one vehicle, and about 30%, 29.3 is safely within the range of a 140-mile electric vehicle, which is a kind of the standard range of the best available vans and cutaways today. And so the 48 points, the ones in the middle, in good conditions, you could do it, but the ones in the red are trips that could not be accomplished by today's technology, battery electric vehicle, without a midday charging swap. Doing a combined scenario would let you purchase some battery electric vehicles, which are more available today and more affordable both to purchase and operate, while still keeping it open for fuel cell vehicles, which will not have the same range restrictions as battery electric. Next slide. So from a cost side, we've done more detailed total cost of ownership analysis and shown that ICE internal combustion vehicles, the standard gasoline vehicles, end up being more expensive than the electric vehicles after about 3 years, just based on the cost of gasoline being more expensive than the cost of electricity. Hydrogen vehicles are not expected to be cheaper than either, definitely not cheaper than electric vehicles and not cheaper than gasoline vehicles.
Question there. You're saying that it's going to be cheaper to operate EVs after 3 years of ownership. And somewhere you have some tables looking at that gas is going up and electricity is coming down. I would like to see the documentation behind that, because that goes contrary to common sense as far as I can see. And I'll talk about it more here, but I'm just making a comment here because I don't believe the statement.
Okay. It's actually probably a good transition to the next. Well, I'll describe this this chart a little bit more, and we do have some numbers on the next slide as well. But just this is based on kind of 10 years of ownership of the vehicle. So that top green line shows kind of a more expensive hydrogen vehicle and more expensive hydrogen fuel. So it gets kind of more expensive over time. And the crossing point between the the kind of orange, yellow, orangish line and the blue line is, it starts out higher with the electric vehicle being more expensive, but just based on a yearly fuel cost, that those.
Could you tell me where the crossover point is? What is the cost per kilowatt of electricity and what is the cost per gallon of diesel fuel at that crossover?
Yes, that's actually the next slide. So if we can move to the next slide.
Greg's just spurring you on.
No, that's great. So the fuel cost.
Asked me to ask these, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So the fuel cost we assumed in kind of a high, medium, and low case for internal combustion vehicles is $3.84 to $5.85 a gallon. I would note these are gasoline vehicles. 100% of the vehicles that DHL uses are gasoline. They're V8 or some, I think, V10 Ford motors. And then for electric vehicles, we were using 20 to 30 cents a kilowatt hour. 20 cents, the current commercial rate that is available through Ready Electric is as low as 17 cents. It depends on, there's a demand charge and an energy charge. So we did model, going from 17 cents, 20 cents was kind of our low estimate. And then we looked at 25 and 30 cents. So that's a 50% increase in the cost of electricity.
So your crossover point is using 30-cent electricity?
Yes.
Can I make a clarification? Because I want to make sure I'm understanding as well. We're just talking about DHCL in the city of Reading using REU as a source for energy. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is one vehicle based in Bernie that would be using PG&E electricity that would be a little bit more expensive. But for the purposes of this kind of cost of ownership analysis, we're trying to kind of compare apples to apples, look broadly at the costs. Something when we get to the recommendations is, adopting this plan today doesn't lock you into a certain scenario, and we recommend that before any vehicles are purchased or infrastructure installed, that, staff or future consultants take a kind of hard look at the costs that are in place at that point. And then for the hydrogen cost, we used between $9 and $11 a kilogram for hydrogen, which And
that's green hydrogen?
That's green hydrogen. Broadly, there's a lot of uncertainty with hydrogen costs, but 9 to 11 is what other agencies are paying or have contracts for, just for the hydrogen fuel. Some of the public stations, and I know I chatted with John and RABA, some of the public stations are over $20 a kilogram right now for public light duty. Is kind of if you're someone who has a hydrogen vehicle and in Sacramento and you drive up to public stations, the cost currently is over $20 a kilogram for hydrogen. So we thought 9 to 11 was a pretty reasonable estimate. We did do some modeling on hydrogen specifically, and it would have to get down to under $3 a kilogram to be kind of cheaper than gasoline and approaching the cost of electricity.
I don't have a feel for hydrogen costs at all, but I do have a feel for gasoline costs, and I do have a feel for electricity. Our city of Shasta Lake, we provide our own electricity. We have to buy it. And yes, we were buying it for about 20, or providing it for about 20 cents. But that is probably going up to 30 cents real soon. And the reason it is the state is mandating that 30% and soon 50% of our energy has to be bought from renewables, and it's not available. We had been buying it from Oregon and Washington, but Oregon and Washington have just installed cap and trade. So guess what? Oregon and Washington are now buying all their green energy, and they're not selling it to California. So it's not available in California. So the cost of electricity is going to skyrocket. And the state, 13%, now you're talking about just REU. I'm talking to Northern California. 13% of our power comes from Diablo Canyon. Diablo Canyon is supposed to go offline in 2030. It was supposed to go off in 2025. They've extended it to 2030. So about the time you're thinking you're going to have 100% of new buses are going to be electric, we're going to lose 13% of the power grid in Northern California. And it's not going to be availability. I mean, it's not going to be price. It's going to be availability. And I think this report needs to address some real factors. Not one of those points that I just brought up is mentioned in this report. I also see the report is due in 8 days. I don't know what happens if we take this report and rewrite it with some actual, facts or looking ahead as to where the two markets are going.
On that question, I can answer that one.
Yes.
So if we need to submit a plan so we're not in non-compliance. CARB recognizes that these are pretty much living documents. The plans are going to go through several iterations. A lot of the larger agencies that have already had earlier target requirements for new bus purchases have already had to develop plans, and some of them have been in their second or third version of that. So CARB recognizes this is an evolving process, and that agencies will have to go through several steps and probably do a number of updates as we learn and as we go through our own stages of figuring out how to comply. So I'm not too concerned on that end in terms of saying, hey, it's a living document. We even acknowledge it's a living document, and CARB staff and CARB themselves recognize it's an ongoing process.
Well, maybe on plan recommendations, when it says models show that battery EVs become more cost effective than internal combustion in the future, maybe that should be reworded to say, some current models predict, but reality says that this may not actually happen. So I think we ought to at least put a caveat in there that says this is real world, hoping you're going to be able to get it from REU. And if REU, their 5 gas turbine generators, if they can't comply and they force them to go offline with a gas turbine, there's not going to be any extra electricity to be charging these vehicles. So, I mean, I'm not saying REU is going to pull back their gas, but I know the price is going to go up on the gas. And there is there is a push to get rid of all natural gas fired turbines, and no new ones are being permitted in California. So if one blew up, could they replace it? I don't know the answer to that.
If I could, what you could do, or saying, like anything else, an opinion's based on the assumptions.
Right.
Yep. So this is based on current price assumptions, which are acknowledged to be
highly speculative,
but they're the best information available.
Oh, okay, I've got another point, but go on.
Okay, well, if I direct your attention to the lower graph shows kind of the total estimated 10-year cost for operating one of these vehicles. So you can see the range for the internal combustion vehicle between about $380,000 and $600,000. This is just kind of fuel maintenance and the original purchase price. This doesn't, talk about what it costs to operate the service. You can see the electric vehicle shows it, being in the same range, noting if you can imagine that box getting a lot larger, that is a potential with what you described. And the hydrogen is a much wider cost because there's more uncertainty on that.
So one question, if you're going out 10 years, you're assuming the battery's going to make 10 years in this bus, or you're going to have to replace it at year 7?
It's assuming the battery lasts the life of the bus.
That's probably not a valid assumption. So I think you ought to make a note there that this assumes batteries may make 7 years. On my solar, I've never had a battery make 10 years.
Can I ask as well, the electric vehicle cost, lower than gas? They're like 2.5 times. Oh, the initial,
The top graph shows the initial purchase.
okay,
price.
I'm sorry,
Greater, that's the initial purchase price is between 200 and 350,000 versus 150.
so you gotta add all those together then.
So the bottom one is adding those top two together over 10 years.
Okay.
In the fiscal impact section, we do a summary roughly to kind of take some of this and.
Okay.
ask Kevin,
Combine it all
make
together.
a little Easier for us to even understand as well, like, what are we talking about total cost? And we summarize that in that staff report to kind of compare.
What if you added on the electric and replace batteries at year 7?
That would increase the cost on.
Significantly.
Yes.
Yes. And maybe we should have that in here as a realistic option. Consideration.
Well, if I may, the opinion is based on the assumptions. So you could list your assumptions.
Right.
If you feel, or like.
Can we correct, as a board, can we correct or add additional assumptions to the study?
Well, I don't know, they're making the opinion, I don't think you can. Well, I guess you could ask, but.
Well, we can,
the point.
we don't have to vote for it. The board can vote for or against,
Yeah.
so
I wouldn't vote for this.
that's the truth of the matter. But as legislatively, we can say, no, I don't want to do that. But majority wins and you get to. Right? You're saying, legal counsel saying we can't necessarily rewrite.
Well, you could ask it, but the point is, I mean, if I were writing this, I'd make sure, if I was you signing this thing, I'd make sure there's a lot of assumptions in here. You know, we're assuming the price of hydrogen, like, come on. I mean, you have to make an assumption, but no one in the world has any idea what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Well, alternatives to this is listed. The board can request additional information or specific modifications to the plan.
I think if you want to meet the deadline, you approve the report, but make sure that it's based on those present assumptions, acknowledging that those present assumptions may be.
And I think the plan does that.
Yeah, okay.
It acknowledges that we were looking at today's real numbers. We don't know where they're gonna go. You don't have a crystal ball. We don't have a crystal ball.
And we don't, like, I totally get what you're saying. We don't know when Diablo County's gonna go, and to be, you know, there, I don't know what portion of Diablo County's portfolio are already used and everything. There's so many other factors that come in. What we're trying to do is gonna give some sort of baseline to start somewhere. There's a lot of rough edges to the information for us to figure out where we're headed. We're making the best assumptions that we can. There are a variety of assumptions. I have a number of concerns. I know HCL also has other concerns as well. Really, this plan helps set the stage for us to have a baseline of something to work off of that we can then move forward on. The other element I see on this as well, you know, with the rest of the presentation for Kevin to look at is really is then a partnership between SRTA and HCL to look at a capital as another step, as a jumping off point from this to say, okay, what are some other additional realities that we haven't been able to do? How do we move forward? What those actual costs are going to be and start really being able to get into some real deep conversations across the board over months with REU and other partners to say, okay, what are these costs going to be? What is the capacity? What is this? And then start being to have a way to do that. But some of that's also going to require you need some additional, expertise from others that are engineers and others that can look at this. So this is really a plan to say, this is what we think we can do based upon the requirements that have been given. But we also recognize several things. There's a lot of assumptions, and the assumptions are listed in here. 2, in the resolution even, I added a section, in addition to the template language we're asked for, that says a lot of this is not going to be possible with a lot of state and federal, funding support. And some of it may not be possible without all that. And there's a lot of unknowns of things that we plan. And we don't know what, the next thing that the utility commission is going to vote in terms of, heights to PG&E or what's going to happen. So those things are going to be fluid, and we're going to have to deal with them as they happen. And so there's a lot of unknowns that we're trying our best. We're not going to know all those until reality happens when we get to that point.
This is a point in time. Somebody say, hey, we need a plan at this point in time. Well, this is the plan at this point in time. Obviously, it's going to change.
Personally, I think it's going to change to hydrogen is going to be the wave of the future, but for
Whatever,
now,
no, but I mean, it's not gonna be.
but for now, I'll make the motion to go ahead and,
Oh, he's not finished with his presentation.
If you, I can speed through this if there's readiness to make a motion.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question? When it says option 1, 2, or 3, are we actually picking an option, or are you just offering those as options as part of this?
We're presenting those as options. The recommendation is we're not picking a single option, but that staff is going to, upon adoption of this, staff will continue to work to assess the different options.
We're voting on a resolution, so, and I'm a little, finish your presentation and I'll go after you.
So the next slide should talk about infrastructure. If we move to the next slide. So the infrastructure needs with electric and hydrogen are different. On the existing DHCL site, there is capacity to install 1 to 2 charging stations. Wanted to make an early purchase of 1 to 2 electric vehicles. There's electrical capacity to install a station at the existing DHCL site. There is some existing public infrastructure if vehicles needed a midday charge. But for a full build out of infrastructure to charge 10 or more vehicles, we're looking at $500,000 or more just to fund the
500 to 1.5 is what your report says.
The 1.5, that also includes the potential addition of other public charging sites in the region for the vehicles to use. But yes,
big gap.
Starting it, and that the gap, that's kind of based on some feedback. 500,000 is based on prices we've seen today. We know electrical components are getting more expensive, so it could be up to 1.5 million. That's representing that gap. The hydrogen refueling station is being planned for the site adjacent to RABA that already has capital funding allocated to build a hydrogen station there. For the ShastaConnect vehicles, we think that will only account for 10 to 15% kind of additional fuel throughput for that station. So it wouldn't require additional capital outlay to use that station. It just means a little bit more fuel going through that station. The one challenge with hydrogen is there's not a second station in the region after that gets built. But we are, the other question is the source of hydrogen. So Reading Rancheria is working on it. Other news is a project in Butte County in Oroville just received an additional $5 million from the state, which, as I understand it, means they're definitely going to build that plant in Oroville now that they've got their funding lined up. And that plant will produce a lot of hydrogen, 24 tons per day, which we're talking about using 100 kilograms a day. So there will be that source from Butte County, as well as a potential source from hydrogen from Reading Rancheria. Moving to the next slide. So this is the replacement schedule, and I think this is one of the key components of the plan, but also has some flexibility behind it. So with the 25% requirement, if you're procuring less than 2 vehicles, you don't have, it rounds down to 0. You will not have to buy a hydrogen or electric vehicle if you only procure 2 vehicles in a year. Based on the current schedule, you might have to procure 3 vehicles in 2027, but you could extend the life of 1 vehicle or replace it early to avoid having to purchase any vehicles until 2029. So we'll know a lot more about the range of battery vehicles increasing in the next few years, as well as the availability of both hydrogen vehicles and infrastructure. So there's kind of some time to continue to evaluate before a final purchase decision or capital outlay is programmed. And the graph on the side just shows, there's spikes in the years that you buy those vehicles in terms of what the kind of total fleet costs are. Again, that's separate from what the operating costs paying DHCL for the drivers in this. But either way, starting in 2029 or 2030 on this schedule, because there's not currently a vehicle scheduled to be replaced.
So that chart was not in our package, right?
No.
No. These No, that chart with the spikes was not a
Yeah, that looks realistic.
Appreciate that. We move on to the next slide. The workforce, as I mentioned, this is a requirement both of the state and federal programs that you consider what the workforce impacts are. I think the key here is that the first bullet is that this is going to be a collaboration with other agencies, including RABA. Drivers that are currently employees of the contractor, there's some basic training that they'll need to introduce them to the vehicles, as well as some materials if they do have to charge in public or how to use a hydrogen fueling station. It's pretty basic. The maintenance is a slight more of a concern. The current maintenance shop that services the ShastaConnect vehicles has said they don't want to work on hydrogen or electric vehicles. So that will be something that will have to be found before purchasing one of these vehicles, is where it can be serviced. RABA has, offered to continue discussions if RABA is training their technicians to service these type of vehicles, to collaborate there as well. And the automakers are providing training, and Shasta College and their automotive technology program now is offering some classes on electric and hybrid vehicles. And so, recommending that the agency and the operators, continue to collaborate with the college to make sure that there's training courses that will cover the vehicles to be seen in this area. And the next slide just outlines the challenges again, which have already been well stated, but on vehicle availability, there's not currently hydrogen vehicles available in cutaways or vans for the ShastaConnect service. And these battery electric vehicles don't have the range to do half the trips today without a midday charge. The cost is noted that it's definitely the vehicles and infrastructure are going to be more expensive, and maybe the fuel will be more expensive as well. And there's grants that will offset some of these costs, but not all the costs. Infrastructure, as noted, is an upfront cost. There's also the concern about resiliency, both for electric and hydrogen. What happens if a station goes down or the power is not available, and then the maintenance, which I just covered. So we acknowledge these all as challenges in the plan that, as the agency moves towards adoption of these vehicles, should consider challenges as they select a vehicle to adopt. And if the next slide is, I think, just a final summary, if we move on to consider the resolution. And again, the key being that we recommend that staff continues to evaluate improvements in battery electric and hydrogen options, explore all the funding opportunities, and update these plans with updated assumptions, more about future costs for vehicles and fuels. And the other things shown in these slides, these are just outlining all the components that are within the plan that are required to meet these state and federal requirements. And I think emphasizing again, on the cost side, this plan is adopted both to meet the CARB requirement, but also will make sure that the agency is eligible for all applicable federal opportunities, some of which Sean mentioned earlier. So there are, is more federal money today that's available to help both vehicle purchases, infrastructure, as well as further planning for low and zero emission transit vehicles. And so this plan will put the agency in a position to apply for those other funding opportunities.
Well, that was quick.
Can I add some other points? Since I noticed that we received some good comments regarding the cost, I want to mention that currently we are on some kind of uncertainty era, because you are correct, the electricity is going to be, the cost of the electricity is going to be high. But on the other hand, we have lots of technical improvements for providing renewable energy sources from sun and other renewable sources. And in addition, for the battery life size, as you mentioned, currently we cannot expect battery life size for 10 years. But considering the improvements, technical improvements, we can expect better battery life. Then I want to say that currently we are in some kind of uncertainty era. And considering that estimating some kind of realistic cost is not possible at the moment because we do not have enough information to be able to provide that data. So the cost that we are going to consider at the moment at this plan is some kind of cost in the middle, considering both technical improvements and also the some kind of cost that today we have. Therefore, we consider this plan as a live document to be able to achieve more information in future. And then based on the information that we will receive in future, we can decide to update the plan if it is necessary. Thank you.
And I'll just add, with the plan, our intent is essentially initially during the years is replace at 2 vehicles a year when vehicles need to be replaced with gas vehicles. Because of a lot of these, so in that period and before we actually get to that, it's 100% and you have to buy unless you've got exceptions. That is essentially part of our plan, is to continue to kind of do that process, because a lot of vehicles we don't have in the vehicle categories that we're going for. Huh?
To get access.
To be compliant.
That require the plan.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, so.
We've got the plan.
Go ahead.
So we have got the plan to help us plan ahead. Our other intent through that period of time is, as we replace there, but also at least pursue a pilot so we can start to learn from it and learn actual costs, actual infrastructure, and update our plan and know with the real information of what we are seeing here today and whatever current period of time we're in with electrical costs, gas costs, et cetera. So I just add that as another element.
So are we done with the presentation?
Yes.
So even though my thoughts of electric vehicles align with Greg's 100%, to move forward, I would make a motion to go ahead and approve this, to move forward with this. And
Before you make the motion, may I make one more suggestion?
absolutely.
Our next item here, we talk about carbon reduction program. And realistically, if we could add an option 4 in here that said, request CARB to look at a carbon reduction program for our buses. And it would blend batteries, charging stations, plus a small internal combustion engine running at optimum efficiency with minimal pollution coming out. In other words, if you had a bus that had a 400 horsepower engine, you would put an engine like 25 horsepower. It would generate electricity all day long, and it would let your buses in the red category, remember you had them in the red, that can't complete their route without being recharged. If they had small internal combustion engine generating electricity and sort of charging during the day, that bus could make it all day. And I think that is a realistic option. But CARB has said, no way. But we ought to add it and say, you want a realistic option? Here's number 4. This is the real world that would make it work, and you would reduce carbon.
Yeah. So there is a reference in the full report to some hydrogen vehicles that are being designed that have a plug to charge with electricity, but also allow you to fuel it with hydrogen to extend the range. And so that's a hydrogen fuel cell that creates electricity, not a combustion engine, but
create electricity with hydrogen. So let's just talk about hydrogen just for a second. We got to have green hydrogen for it to count. And hydrogen production, you have to generate hydrogen 24 hours a day. You cannot shut down the process. It's a process just like a refinery. It has to go on all the time. And from 10 to 3, you can generate hydrogen with solar. And from 9 to 9 o'clock at night, you can generate with wind. You can't generate with solar at night. So about half of your hydrogen that you're going to generate using electricity has to come from fossil fuels, and it won't qualify for green. And I don't think there's any way to get around. You can gear down your production to 20% at night, but you need 100% capacity.
Are we discussing item 15 right now? Are we discussing item 15 right now?
No, he's talking about another option.
Okay.
Well, so the potential of vehicles that plug in that also take hydrogen is allowed for within the plan, would be a zero emission vehicle. And actually the
internal combustion engine is not.
An internal combustion engine is not. The current state requirement for hydrogen is it only has to be 33% renewable. So it doesn't have to be 100% kind of green.
They have changed that, huh?
Yes. And there is, as I said, 24 tons per day.
It only has to
and
be
for
30
Butte County.
green. They might as well allow my small internal combustion engine.
Greg, I'm going to move this forward.
Okay, that's my last comment on that.
Locking us into anything. As they've said, this is a living document. What this is doing for us is it's getting our foot in the door so that we don't get left out in the cold. Am I correct?
I don't think the resolution says that, Chair. I'm just going to.
Well, doesn't it also afford us that when we actually purchase these vehicles, it'll come back to us each and every time? So it's not like we adopt something, we don't hear from it again.
Right.
It can change every step of the way. We have to approve it. So
Just show me where that says in the resolution and I'll vote for it. But I don't see that.
Added in there that this plan, this rollout plan, meets or exceeds the requirements of the federal and state regulations, but we also recognize that we're going to need significant investment to make the challenging, to meet this without federal and state support. We're going to need that to make this work.
It can't even get there with more dollars.
I'm not talking about what it says in the staff report. I'm talking about what it says on the resolution. It's not a living document in the resolution. There's no flexibility in there. It's a pretty cut and dried resolution. If the way I read it, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what you're voting on. You're not voting on a staff report.
Right.
You're voting on a resolution. You're going to pass a resolution that is not very flexible the way I read it. So just correct me. I'm just saying.
I don't see the resolution being one of those that's tying you in and says, hey, you have to do this and it's gonna have to be by this time. Essentially, you're saying there's a goal, whereas number 3 is first bullet point is a goal of full transition. But that doesn't mean we're going to get to full transition. And you probably frankly will not get a full transition the way it's headed. So it's a goal to work towards full transition, but how we do that and in the time frame that we do it and with the funding that we have, that will be an item that will come before the board multiple times over the next decade or more. Or how do we actually continue with the plan? The plan does not hold us into it. CARB isn't going to say, hey, you did this and you're going to replace those vehicles right in. The legislation itself, the regulation itself also provides a number of caveats. There are exceptions to the rule that says you can make the case on a number of different factors to say you can't do the transition in the time frame because infrastructure or costs or lack of vehicle availability or don't meet the parameters that you need. So there's a lot of things outside of just the resolution that provide us and afford us the ability to move forward.
Why did some of those points get added to the resolution then?
That's a challenge, Sean. You're asking this board to approve something that does not say anything like that. It's not in the staff report and it's not on the resolution.
What language would you prefer to add in?
it's just a function of government, isn't it?
Meaning what, Tanessa? Help me understand.
It's my understanding, and I could be wrong, and hopefully the people in the room can help, but it's my understanding that in a lot of these things, the state is asking that you begin to make a plan. And so you're saying, okay, we're going to make a plan. I would agree with everything that you've stated. It doesn't account for batteries. These are the questions we asked in our pre-meeting, like, wait, but this doesn't account for batteries. How can that possibly be? If they take the gas tax away, they're going to charge us for electricity. They're going to figure out a way to make money off of us moving around. And so, I mean, I agree with all of the points that you're making. I don't think it's feasible. I don't agree with the assessment. However, the state's asking us for a plan according to what they have desired us to do. So if this says, hey, we acknowledge your plan, we acknowledge what you want, here's our plan, but every step along the way we have to approve. So like Sean said, if there's 2 vehicles that go out of commission, we would have to say, do we want to buy electric vehicles or do we want to buy gas vehicles? We have the ability to get a waiver because of our length of our buses that they have to go. It's over 140 miles. Well, I don't think it says it here. I think it's in the many, as we had that presentation earlier, there's like all of these different aspects of where funding comes from. And there's a bunch of caveats that have to be met for each of those different funding places. And as Sean has said in that previous report, if we don't have a vehicle that we could purchase for the mileage that we needed to go, then they could give us a waiver in order to get a gas vehicle before these dates.
So if I could, I'd like to propose something as an extra whereas in there, and you can hear me out.
I'm listening.
So essentially, whereas the SRTA recognizes that the plan, I spelled the whole plan out, is a living document, and a periodic evaluation will be needed to update as unknown factors are realized.
Needed to update the board of directors, like we're the board of directors. We're responsible. We're responsible.
The governing board.
We're responsible for, the board of directors is responsible for passing this resolution.
You are
We-
SRTA in.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand. No, totally, but.
Excuse me, you might.
We're not voting on this. You guys are staff.
You might want to look at the whereas on the top of the second page.
SRTA has considered all current relevant information available today, including the state and federal requirements and regulations, availability of vehicles and technologies, and all relevant written community comments which have been submitted in a timely manner.
I don't believe.
The third one, the third one says it may be challenging to meet with, without their support. Like it does say in the third one, like we're letting them know this is a pipe dream. And if you want us to do it, you're going to have to fund it. And even then, we don't even have the supply. There's nobody that's even making half of these things. So they can say that they want us to also have flying cars, but until there's some to purchase, I'm not sure that that's going to actually happen. So this is like we know in government, everything takes 8,000 steps. This is one step to compliance. But it doesn't mean it's adoption. I mean, we're not adopting that we purchase the vehicle.
All right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to point out so that you're correct that some of the things you've asked aren't in the resolution, but the plan itself, which is the larger document, the last recommendation on page 10 says that SRTA should, I don't know if you got the full plan with your package.
We don't
But
have that.
it does say update the plan every 2 to 3 years in a living document. It also has information on asking the CARB executive officer for a waiver if technology doesn't exist. So that's
But there you're begging for a waiver. I think what Sean says, we ought to add that whereas, and I think that's a step in the right direction, but I'm still going to vote no.
And the revision,
That's helpful.
if I may, the revision I have tonight.
You got Vanessa to laugh. That's.
Mr. Gallagher's comment about the board is this. The SRT, whereas the SRTA recognizes that the plan, which I'll spell out, is a living document and that periodic evaluation and update by the SRTA board of directors will be needed as unknown factors are realized.
No.
Does that address your concern? To the extent that you recognize it's been coming back.
Well, because we're handing this off to somebody else. Another group of people sitting on the SRTA board is going to inherit what we do today.
Correct.
We're going to give this to somebody else, and I'm not very comfortable doing that when it starts out that CARB is mandating this. It's right in the first whereas which mandates
This doesn't
public
bind,
transit agents.
this doesn't bind a future, just a
Bet you it will.
future board can change it.
Well, I agree, but
That's the thing that matters to me, Mike, is that the next board or in 8 months, we can kick it out. Yeah, seriously.
But it's not
I trust
a
this
solution that.
I can pick up this building.
Yeah, no,
Hey, Sean, this California regulatory policy is being administered by CARB, is that correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Have we initiated any ability to coordinate with CARB on our own local policy? They have to coordinate with all local governing bodies. Our plan can be very different than their plan. But at the end of the day, coordination, all plans have to match, which means they have to match our plan. Have we attempted coordination with CARB with regards to this?
Well, I think, I mean, in terms of whatever we come up with our plan is the plan, we've said this is our plan to try to meet the regulation requirements that are set.
Well,
CARB has never negotiated on anything.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the regulation is set up the way it is and CARB is in directing it. There's a lot that's, I don't have the ability.
So I would think item 16 would be a good time to do that. I think I would be all for sending a letter to CARB saying that they're absolutely ridiculous and what they
Let's just get through 14
Yeah,
before we
that's
talk
what
to
I'm
16.
saying.
All right, we're gonna move on. We have a motion, we have a second.
Who seconded it?
I don't know who seconded
I'm
it.
asking for a second.
I'll second it.
Vanessa,
Are we making the motion with the added whereas that Sean
That's
communicated?
what I thought.
yeah,
Is that part of it?
Are you,
I will second with that addition.
we're gonna modify the motion by
my
Mr.
motion is to pass a
Kelsman
resolution with the
with the
modification.
modifications that Sean has
Second.
articulated.
Need a couple.
We have a second from
Just to
Vanessa.
show.
Do a roll call vote, Amy.
Okay, Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Cry,
Yes.
Board Member Gallagher,
I am gonna vote no based on the costs involved in the whole design. So that's a no vote.
Board Member Jones,
No.
Board Member Kellstrom,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
and Board Member Watkins.
No,
Thank you.
Guys have it.
Did we get Cry?
Yes. 4 to 3.
4-3.
Passes 4-3.
That was fun.
Yeah, it's great.
Smiles, everybody, smiles. I mean, you guys are working your butts off. We're not mad.
Yeah.
At you guys.
Okay, let's talk about item 15. You're up again, sir.
Eddie's enjoying this process, I can tell.
Michael? Okay, I'm going to talk about our new carbon reduction program policy. That is item number 15 in our today's agenda. Next slide, please. Infrastructure Investment and Job Acts, or IJA, provides $6.4 billion to states and MPOs like SRTA. And IJA funds the Carbon Reduction Program, or CRP, to reduce transportation CO2 emission. And the CRP focuses on on-road sources of CO2 emissions and supports local priorities. And these funds are available for 5 years, starting 2022. Next slide, please. 65% of these CRP funds are considered for local CRP and 35% as state CRP. The local CRP allocation is based on the 2020 US Census population, and MPOs or regional transportation planning agencies receive these local CRPs. The local CRP funds must be used within the region, for example, Shasta County for SRTA, and sub-allocation for these funds are not allowed. Next slide, please. Projects for CRP funds in Shasta County must be selected and programmed by SRTA. And SRTA is going to use a competitive performance driving process for CRP funds and tries to prioritize the local priorities in addition to decrease CO2 emissions. Next slide, please. Eligible applicants include cities, counties, tribal governments, and so on. And eligible activities are listed in FHWA program guideline. And these eligible activities include different planning and construction activities such as traffic monitoring and management, public transport projects like BRT or dedicated bus lane, on-road and off-road facilities for pedestrian, bicyclists, and other non-motorized users, replacing street lighting and traffic control devices with energy-efficient alternatives, zero-emission vehicles and related infrastructure, and so on. These eligible activities need to support 3 pillars that are introduced by Caltrans, which are bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, rail and transit initiatives, and zero-emission vehicles and related infrastructure. And there is also an 11.47% non-federal local match requirement. But I want to mention that the funds can be flexed to FTA upon approval by Caltrans and FHWA. And if funds are flexed to FTA, FTA local match rules apply here. Next slide, please. There are also some priorities, such as sustainable pavement materials, projects that reduce impacts of freight movement, energy efficient street lighting and traffic control devices, rail and transit projects, on-road and off-road bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, purchasing zero-emission vehicles and infrastructure, and so on. And SRTA will consider these priorities for ranking and scoring the eligible activities. Next slide, please. FHWA is responsible for final review and approval of projects. Caltrans HQ Division of Local Assistant is responsible for eligibility review, and District 2 will review projects, input projects information into federal aid data system, and submit details to Caltrans. And SRTA is responsible for managing CRP funds, including call for projects, select and program funding, and track project progress. And eligible applicants are going to identify, compete for, and implement these projects and report on them. Next slide, please. SRTA is going to have a call for projects and provide support to applicants. Then SRTA is going to review and rank the projects and forward recommended projects to the board of directors for approval. And then eligibility needs to be verified by Caltrans DLA HQ CRP coordinator, and the local agencies after that can submit requests for authorization to district after eligibility approval. Then district review and submits to HQ implementation, and HQ implementation verifies eligibility before processing requests for authorization. And finally, FHWA performs final review and approval. And in addition to that, SRTA needs to approve and forward the related TIP amendments to CTC for being included into STIP as a requirement for this program. Next slide, please. So we will have a call for projects in July. Then SRTA will review the projects in August and will provide the ranking and scores for projects in September. And SRTA will present the recommended projects to the board of directors in October. And then we need up to 2 weeks for FHWA and Caltrans eligibility review. And after that, we need to have our TIP amendments be ready for the next available CTC meeting. Regarding the deadlines, I can say that the deadline to obligation is 3 federal fiscal years after the federal fiscal year the funds were apportioned. For example, for federal fiscal year 2022, the obligation deadline will be September 2025, and the expenditure deadline will be September 2030. And the same for fiscal year 2023. The obligation deadline will be September 2026, and the expenditure deadline will be September 2031. Next slide, please. Okay. To effectively manage projects, SRTA will conduct quarterly monitoring and will notify local agency for at-risk projects. SRTA also will request local agencies to prepare an action plan for at-risk projects if needed, and will report the status of the project to the Fiscal Policy Committee, and will seek board approval for the new replaced projects if needed. And overall, SRTA is going to have continuous monitoring for the projects, and they take corrective actions if needed. Next slide, please. So the current allocation for fiscal year 2022 and 2023 will be around 325,000 and 331,000. And we have also some anticipated increases for fiscal year 2024, 2025, and 2026. And the total expected allocation will be around 1,692,000. Next slide, please. Okay, it's recommended that the Board of Directors approve the new carbon reduction program policy and authorize the Executive Director to make administrative changes as needed. Thank you very much, and please let me know your comments and questions.
Questions from the board?
Well, I mean, for me, I can approve this, but it would be limited to the funding priorities. You know, and so to me, a variety of these priorities I wouldn't be interested in, but we could use, this isn't a huge amount of money, so we could do sustainable pavement and construction materials. We could use it for such things as solar arrays. We could use it on projects to replace street lighting. And we could use it for certain types of projects to improve traffic flow. I see some of the things we could use the money for, many of the other things I wouldn't want to. So it's just a matter of how we use these funds to me.
So Sean, let me ask you this question. John, do you have a question?
I just have a question. Does the policy allow for flexing to, like in the case of transit?
Yeah, it's flexing to FDA, I mentioned, yeah.
And that's its matter. Okay, thank you.
And so Sean, these priorities,
he's talking about?
no, we don't have to do all of them.
No, you don't.
Okay, so if we don't, but if we put them all in there, we have those options.
Correct.
I would be opposed to taking them out. I agree that we probably only want to fund, make some of them a priority, but I think we could do that at a later date, but don't limit ourselves at this point. Would be my recommendation.
Well, I didn't say limit. I'm just
Okay.
saying I could support certain things and I wouldn't support others, and we could make, when do those decisions made?
Yeah, so how that process would go through is with the policy, then we can move forward to then do a call for projects. Roughly, if it goes well, we come back to October. So October this year would be when we come to you to say, here's the different projects that were submitted. This is our recommendations. We'll take input, you know, notes that are from this meeting as well, as what the board sees as their priorities and factor those in. And you guys will have the final authority to decide which of those projects you want to fund.
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion from Mr. Jones.
I'll second.
For now. I may change my name.
And a second from Mr. Kelstrom.
And I still had a comment, a question.
Just one?
Just one.
Okay. All right.
I see nothing, we're talking again about carbon reduction program, and I see nothing about a hybrid vehicle in here. And hybrid vehicles reduce carbon, so I would think that would be something that we ought to be able to consider. But
On that, I would say that is going to be subject to whether or not we can get it through both Caltrans and Federal Highway Administration eligibility. That is not, hybrid vehicles are not.
Well, I know, they're not cool at all. They're not woke.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
All right, Amy, let's do the roll call vote.
I'm going to be voting no, but I would like to explain why,
Okay.
because I think it's important. One, according to the federal budget committee with our own representative asked if CO was a problem, and it's carbon dioxide is not a problem.
I know.
We're doing all this based on a lie. I said it before and I'll say it again, and I'm going to continue to say for it until somebody corrects me. Our levels are 0.04%, and if we go much below 0.03%, green things will start dying. So we're basing this on something that's not a problem. Number two, this is a reimbursement program, so we're going to have to come up with the cash first and match it with non-governmental, a non-federal match of 11.47%. So for those three items, for those three reasons, and I'll leave it at just those three. I will be voting no on this particular agenda item.
Duly noted.
Not one thing about carbon dioxide in the report either, by the way, which frustrates me a little bit, so.
I noticed that myself.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Just one thing. Sean, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So just one thing, and I think maybe John was alluding to it. I think when we talk about flex money, I mean, you can exchange a little bit of federal. So in this case, you could potentially give that money for RABA operations in exchange for less LTF money that you use on RABA operations, which mean more streets and roads money back to your agencies.
It's a shell game, so you're, ideologically, I agree with you, but if we can cheat the state legally, that's.
For $100,000 though, is 9.4 million to do the one project, so.
I know.
Sorry, I refuse to get excited about a couple $100,000. I'm only getting 400,000 for the city of Anderson, so, and we could spend $1 million on our roads if we wanted. I don't know why we didn't do have you driven in Cottonwood? They need roads. They don't need sidewalks. They need some
This
freaking
does allow
tarmac.
for some surfacing. It does that, and so to me,
I think it's.
while what they would agree on would be appropriate, I would rather do the, sustainable surfacing, which we could use it for that.
But if it wasn't based on a lie and
Well,
these are taxpayer dollars,
would
by the
agree
way,
with that.
so I'm
agree.
gonna pass, but that's just my own opinion.
Can somebody explain to me what a sustainable pavement materials, is that concrete versus asphalt?
That's manure.
I'm not sure unless.
Patrick, you got Vanessa to laugh too.
We're talking about the pavement recycling, things like that. So using asphalt recycling products or rubberized.
Oh, so that'd be some of the rubberized,
Might be some.
ground up tires?
I'm not 100% sure, but that's likely what they're talking about.
It'd be nice if we knew.
Yeah, or permeable type.
Mark, call for the
asphalt.
There's some pavementful stuff too.
Well, yeah, open graded asphalt. I know all about that, but I don't know what
Do
sustainable.
we have a motion?
We have a motion
And a second.
and a second.
Are we ready for
Doing the
roll call vote?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to start from the top. So bear with me, Gallagher, Board Member Gallagher. Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Cry,
Yes.
Board Member Gallagher,
Yeah, no, that's a no, that's a hard pass, no.
Board Member Jones,
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Watkins.
No,
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, moving on to item 16. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
So far with my notes, I have requests for a cattle project, especially regarding the hiding opposition and the application process, which we will get back to you on which meeting that will be.
Thank you.
And then we also have a suggestion to write a letter to CARB in regards to the ICT related projects.
Okay, you'll bring that back to us in August?
Subject, we will let you
We'll
know.
have to let you know on
Okay.
how quickly we can collect the information.
Can I write that letter to CARB?
Yeah, that was my suggestion.
You know,
Don't use the word manure though, if you
Put
can.
it on Jones Fort letterhead.
could the letter card be circulated to the board members for comments before it's finalized?
Okay.
Yeah, I think anything we do is come up with, if you have suggestions, what you like the
Yeah,
comment letter be, send those to me.
No, write the letter first and let us comment.
Well, we have to tell them what we want in the letter.
Well,
Just dear
He'll figure it
Carb.
out.
they're intelligent staff. They know how we think a
We'll
little
get back
bit.
to, yes,
Okay.
we would provide a draft that you could review, that you could provide comment beforehand to go through. We would probably also go through fiscal and policy, because there are agents as for the board to review fiscal policy as initial comments as well. And bring it to you. If you want a draft done and then update it before you send it, we can do that between.
Patrick can write the first one. I'm fine with that.
Make a motion that Patrick Jones writes the letter to CARB.
I second.
Yeah. I know.
Okay. Any other suggestions before?
No other suggestions.
He had the
We're
cattle.
now going to adjourn the closed session.
Tanessa, I will bring you in on this laptop here for the closed session.
Thank you, folks. And we never got to hear from you.
coming up right now. Michael, can you hear us?
I'm off camera anyway, the way what you said. Kevin, I have a question too, before you sleep.
Michael, Amy, can you hear us?
Yep,
I'm
we're
gonna
here.
get no ribs.
Thank you.
It's gonna happen. I'm gonna get vegetables.
Okay, Mark, you're ready.
Okay, we've come out of closed session with no reportable action. That being said, we are adjourned.
John, thank you.
People.